My entitled sister demanded that I drive her to see her friend on Christmas Day, but when I refused to do so, my sister tried to guilt trip me by drinking so much that she would no longer be able to drive, and thus try to force me to drive her to do exactly what she wanted. But even then, I stood my ground, resulting in my sister driving under the influence and eventually crashing and totaling her car. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, my sister and I used to be neighbors, so to speak. I live in a sub-building rented from my parents, and she lived in a fifth-wheel trailer with her kids next to it. On Christmas Day about 3 years ago, she and her visiting ex-husband along with their kids were outside having fun in the snow. I went outside to hang out with them, and at a random point, my sister suddenly asked me to take her later on to meet a friend of hers because they were alone with no family on Christmas. Now, I didn't want to do this because not only did I not know this person, but I know my sister very well. If I were to have been her ride, I would have been stuck waiting there for hours. When she wanted me to do this sort of thing for her back then, it was because she wanted to drink and couldn't have alcohol if she drove herself. Also, it was snowing and the roads were covered, and I really just didn't want to risk it. For reference, my truck is a 98 RWD Ford F-150, and I had no chains for the tires. It's a heavy steel beast that could slip off the road very easily, and I tend to call it a brick with wheels. I relayed all of that information to my sister, but she still got angry at me for not agreeing, and she couldn't mentally understand that her four-wheel drive car would be better on the snow-covered country roads than my truck. But I couldn't drive her with her car anyways, because it was a manual shift and I drive automatic. She kept acting like my vehicle would do better because it's a truck, but I explained that if it were a 4x4 then yes, but it's rear wheel drive, which means it's both heavy and it's got no front power to help keep traction on the road, so it would slip and slide, and likely would not even be able to make it up the hill. Her car was smaller, lighter, she had chains and traction control. I also have very little experience driving on icy and snowy roads. Well, she basically scoffed and walked away, and I really hoped that she would let it go, but she didn't. After having fun in the snow, we went over to our parents' house and celebrated Christmas Day. Now, my sister didn't speak of wanting me to drive her to see that guy, and I don't know why, but maybe it was because it would be in front of our parents, because she knew that they would tell her to leave me alone. But I did get an occasional dirty look from her if we made eye contact, and when our parents weren't in earshot, she would make a jab at me about how she would do something like that for me if I needed it, and I should be doing it for her. But I did not relent. My sister then started drinking, probably in hopes that she could try and guilt trip me by saying that she was too inebriated to drive. But even still, I didn't relent. As she drank more, her glares towards me kept getting nastier. In fact, that's what she used to do to get her way from me. She would act increasingly bitter and treat me like the bad guy until I caved. But not this time. Anything related to vehicle danger, I have a pretty shiny spine about it. So I just let her glare at me. By the time the party was almost over, she'd obviously realized her spite gambit didn't work. So she hopped her drunk self into her car and took off, even though she was drunk and shouldn't have been driving. She had gotten a DUI a couple of years prior, so she absolutely knew better. But she didn't care. Thankfully, her ex took their kids to his house for a few days, so I wasn't worried about my nephews. I told my parents what my sister had tried to make me do, and they were pretty angry about it too, and backed me up on my decision to say no. Not only because the roads were treacherous, but because it really wasn't fair to me to keep driving her places just so she could get drunk. If she really had so much pity for this guy to visit him for a couple of hours on Christmas, then she could have done it sober. As I said before, I didn't know this guy that she wanted to visit, and my sister just wanted an excuse to go drink with a friend. And if I had taken her, I would have been waiting around for her for hours. My sister has no sense of being on someone else's time either, especially when she's drinking. The phrase time to go meant absolutely nothing to her. She could almost never stick to a deadline if alcohol was involved, so I'm glad I don't have to deal with her anymore. Later on, I was taking a nap when I was awoken to what sounded like my sister's car alarm. I looked out the window and I saw a large truck I didn't recognize leaving her driveway. I went over and I knocked on her door to ask what was going on, and she was absolutely in some kind of mood, and I doubt she was able to drink for the hours she was away with what I learned later. I asked her whose truck I saw, and she angrily told me it was her lonely friend that I didn't take her to see, and he drove home behind her to make sure that she didn't crash. I asked if the roads were really that bad, and she confirmed that they were, so I said that it was a good thing I didn't try to drive my truck on them either then. She then passive-aggressively said, yeah, all before spitefully bidding me goodnight for the evening and slamming the door in my face. Well, fast forward and I learned the next day that my sister had gone off the road and crashed. She messed up her passenger side fender pretty bad, and she had to call the guy she was going to see to come pull her out of the ditch. And then he had to help her get home once she calmed down. So she got a fair dose of karma that day. I felt most sorry for her car though. I mean, she absolutely destroyed that car in the few years that she owned it. That fender was just one of many things to get broken because of her reckless driving. Thankfully, my sister doesn't live here anymore, and we evicted her toxic self in late 2023, and now she's extremely bitter that we won't help her anymore. Wow, your sister is super entitled, and honestly, I love the fact that karma came right back to bite her in the butt. She really tried to play the gambit of like, oh, I'm gonna get so drunk that you have no choice but to drive me where I want. And that is like crazy to me. Like, that's so spiteful and immature, and I just don't blame you for standing your ground and being like, no, I'm absolutely not gonna drive you. Because you're right, you would have been there forever. You would have been on the hook probably until 2 o'clock in the morning, if not later. Like, who's to say she wouldn't just hold you there indefinitely while she gets wasted with some guy that she probably doesn't even know that well. So good for you for standing your ground, because honestly, this probably saved your life. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled sister is literally the bane of my existence, as she has constantly caused problems in my life and my parents' life for as long as I can remember. And now this situation has escalated to a point where quite literally I don't feel comfortable being around her in the slightest, because her life choices and her attitude are truly affecting everybody around us. Here's what happened. So this story is a long one, and I just want to say ahead of time that there's a lot of details that I need to cover. Okay, to start things off, after my sister was evicted from the family property, she went to live with her creepy best friend, who eventually kicked her out. And then after that, she started living with her awful boyfriend, who was also her dealer, if you know what I mean. This guy was messed up in the head and a rage monster, and he was also really smart and fixed up and resold cars despite legally being on disability. The first time I met this guy, I could tell how two-faced he was and wanted to be as far away from him as possible. Then one day my sister called me crying. Apparently her boyfriend had stranded her and her puppy in an unlivable camper trailer on the side of the road, and he was holding the other two of her dogs, her cat, and the title to a car that she had bought from him hostage. He did leave her with another car, but it was an awful Volvo that didn't even run, and the guy had busted out the rear window with a hammer in one of his fits of rage. My sister called the police, but the cops told her that he can break his own stuff, and there wasn't much of anything they could do. Now, I came running to help my sister after she called, despite all the years that she had made me utterly miserable. Her boyfriend's parents came running to help too, because even they know that he is insane, and together we managed to load all of my sister's stuff into my truck. But my sister has no sense of getting rid of unneeded things when forced to downsize, and my F-150 barely contained it all. Then we had to go back to her boyfriend's apartment to get back her pets and car title. Well, this is when we find out that this guy had lockpicked my sister's safe and stole the car title right out of it. And worst of all, he repeatedly denied it with this awful grin on his face. I mean, he was gaslighting everybody. He and my sister spent like an hour shouting back and forth at each other, and it was dark by the time it was all over. My sister threatened to call the cops on him unless he returned the car title, and he kept denying having it. But my sister knew just enough about his life to screw him over if she did call the cops. And when my sister didn't back down after all of that, the guy just stormed up to his apartment because he couldn't gaslight her into leaving. Then, when my sister wasn't looking, he ran back out and threw an envelope through the window of my truck and onto the passenger seat. And then he ran back in. And wouldn't you guess it, it was the title to the car. If I had not seen the guy do it, I just know he would have tried to gaslight my sister and say it was there the whole time. Now, I have no idea if she confronted him about it later, because I never got the chance to find out. My sister then had to go stay with her boyfriend's sister, who was a single mom with 2 kids and another one on the way. I had to drive my sister to go see her, and my sister barely looked up from her phone to give me directions unless I made her. And then she would get irritated with me and tell me that she was busy. Just about every new turn I needed to make, she would tell me almost at the last second. After unloading all of my sister's stuff, she begged me to take her cat home with me, which I did. And that cat was so happy to come back here because he was raised out here. As soon as I pulled in the driveway, he could smell where we were from inside his carrier, and went from meowing with worry to purring intensely. And as soon as I let him out, he ran around the yard happily. Well, ever since then, I've had this cat chipped and registered in my name, because my sister would just take him back to living with a dealer if I allowed her to take him back. My sister spent barely 2 days living with her boyfriend's sister, and the two of them were at each other's throats because my sister is not only impossible to live with, but she also let her dogs pee and go to the bathroom all over the bedroom floor and didn't clean up any of it. In fact, I had to clean it all up when I got there. My sister's boyfriend managed to get that crappy Volvo running for her, only to then grab her by the hair, and she had to floor floor to get away from him, which resulted in a chunk of her hair getting ripped out. I then met up with her and we packed my truck in that Volvo full of her junk and then spent all day driving around with her to multiple places while she tried to find someone to take her in. But the problem is that since she's an entitled narcissist, she's literally burned through 98% of the friend bridges that she had. In fact, very few people even responded to her. She even dragged me to a produce farm where they had workers living out of campers, and even they weren't willing to take her in either. And in all this time, I was the only one walking all 3 of my sister's pugs. She barely got out of her car to do anything, let alone get off of her phone. And even when her phone went dead and had to charge, she simply did not help. If I even got mad at her, she would start crying and act pathetic because of her situation. And then she came up with her dumbest excuse yet. She claims she has split personalities, and that's why she's so mean to people for no reason. I didn't even bother to correct her because she just doesn't listen. She was diagnosed bipolar as a teenager and mentally blocked it out, and she is more than likely a narcissist as well. I've known her my entire life, and she's always been cruel and self-important. Add in being an alcoholic and an addict on top of that, and she's completely lost her mind, just not in the way that she thinks. She doesn't have any symptoms one would expect of split personality disorder. She doesn't identify by 2 different names or as 2 different people, and she doesn't get any memory loss from personality shifts. She just convinced herself that she's got split personalities for sympathy, and I really wish I was making this stuff up, but it all really happened. After following my sister from place to place for several hours on end, with her finding nowhere to live, we ended up parked in front of a convenience store at the beginning of the road home, or at least home for me, but not for her anymore. She's not allowed on the property at all. We spent hours parked there, while my sister kept calling and messaging people looking for someone to take her in, but no one did. What's worse is that I found out that day was the last day of her cell phone plan before it was cut off for non-payment, because her cell phone plan was through her piece of garbage boyfriend, and after that she could only message me through social media using Wi-Fi. During the hours we parked in front of this convenience store, my sister drove me ever more crazy with her entitlement. For example, at one point I asked her if she was thirsty and she said yes. So I went into the store and I bought her a big bottle of cold water. And not only was she ungrateful for it, she was mad that it wasn't beer. And then she wanted me to go back in and buy her a beer. I told her I would not facilitate her drinking and driving. But when I said that, she began berating me and then angrily ignored me for a while. In fact, she didn't even drink the water that I gave her. On a hunch, I asked her to pop the hood of the Volvo that she was driving because the engine sounded a little bit rough. I then checked the oil and guess what? There was like none in the engine. So I googled the type of oil that the car needed and I went back into the convenience store. It was $8 for a quart of oil and it was literally only used so that the Volvo's engine wouldn't seize up. Then I asked my sister how much gas she had. And not only was the car on E, the fuel warning light had come on. And at this point I was furious because literally she waited until then to finally tell me, because now I have no choice but to buy her gas. And right as I'm getting gas, she says to me, "My car only takes premium fuel." And I'm thinking to myself, oh, fantastic. I mean, you just can't make this crap up. I had to pull out $20 from my wallet and I told her to go get gas at the nearby station. And then I told her that the $20 was for gas only, no beer. She then started crying and actually said, "Can I just get 1 beer?" And I said, "No." She then tried to beg me, but I was adamant. This is my money, so it's only being used for gas. Now, I really figured that she would get beer anyways, but for once she actually did as she was told. She went and got the gas and then she came back. And then she acted nice, but was still clearly upset because I still would not buy her the alcohol. I then ended up calling our parents on speaker to give them an update on the situation, and our mother was worried out of her mind, but our parents still refused to let my sister come back home after everything she had put us and her kids through, which, trust me, is a long story in and of itself. And I just know that if we allowed my sister to come back, even just for a little while, she would plant herself in my camper trailer and refuse to leave. So I was upfront in advance with my parents that my sister would not be staying in my camper. Now, my mother did admit to wanting to suggest it if it was just for one night or two, but realized I had had enough of my sister and didn't ask me. While on the phone, our mother started talking about how she'd get a baseball bat if my sister's boyfriend laid a finger on her again, and also started talking about getting my sister a motel room for the night. Meanwhile, my sister was losing her mind, having a tantrum in her car because she just has to make our mother the villain in her life. My sister literally can't function unless she has someone to blame and hate. I mean, that's how she's always been. During her tantrum, she was flailing her arms around and making incoherent noises. I kept trying to shush her without cluing our mother in, and my sister gave me a glare and rolled up her window to sit and pout. Well, my sister kept refusing to let our mother book her a motel room, and she started yelling that there's no way a motel would let her bring in 3 dogs, and that our mother freaking knows it. And no, our mother didn't know it. She was literally just trying to help. By this point, it was getting dark, and I needed to go home. I called my parents back, and they okayed me to bring my sister's junk home with me for the moment, but it all had to stay in my truck. Well, I had no choice but to leave my sister to spend the night in her awful car. So my sister started furiously digging through the back of my truck, looking for her dog food, but she couldn't find it. I then had to go back into the convenience store and buy her a $12 bag of dog food. And after giving her the dog food, that's when she suddenly said, "She's going to pass away, you know." And when she said that, I'm like, what are you talking about? She then told me that our mother was going to pass away. She then went on a rant about how her previous boyfriend passed away after cheating on her, and the woman he had cheated on her with also passed away soon after in something unrelated. My sister said that everyone who crosses her passes away, and our mother would be next. Well, needless to say, I was mortified and I got out of there. I then told my parents exactly what my sister said, and they were mortified too. As for my sister, she drove that crappy Volvo all the way back to her awful boyfriend's apartment and just spent the night parked there. Her boyfriend started scaring the crap out of her by getting on his motorcycle and circling the apartment complex, eyeing her like a vulture. And then my sister messaged me through social media in the middle of the night and said her boyfriend was coming for her. He literally said he was going to take her out earlier if he went back to prison. My sister then apparently heard shots fired and was freaking out and texting me like it was her last moment on earth. Now, I was ready to call the cops, but she refused to let me and said that they were completely useless. Then she texted me close to the morning and said that it was all fine and that what she was hearing was something unrelated. Then her boyfriend, just to be a jerk, decided to stab one of her Volvo tires, meaning that she had to put a spare on it just to make it work. Our mother then got in touch with her and got her that motel room for the night. And unsurprisingly, my sister wasn't very appreciative, and the motel treated my mother like garbage over the phone because they didn't want to book the room without holding her credit card. They made her jump through Lord knows how many hoops just to book the room. And guess what? My sister spent the night in the motel with her 3 dogs in that room. So I guess motels do allow it, but you can bet that she definitely did not apologize. And then the following day when my sister had to leave the motel, she went right back to her awful boyfriend's place and then messaged me just to bring her stuff back there. All that crap for the past few days just to end up back where she freaking started. I was pissed and my parents were as well. I drove back to my boyfriend's apartment in a fury, all the while practicing a speech in my head to tell my sister exactly what I thought of her. When I got there, my 40-year-old sister was dressed like a teenager in tiny shorts. She had a tube top on and her hair was tied in a sideways ponytail, which by the way did not flatter her at all because her face has aged badly from all the substances she's taken, if you know what I mean. She looked like she'd be on an episode of Cops any day now. Her boyfriend was there constantly, and I didn't want to risk pissing off this nutcase by yelling at my sister in front of him. So I just unloaded all of her stuff as fast as I could. Then I gave her some money because I knew she had zilch to her name, and I told her not to contact us until she goes to rehab or something, and then I turned to walk away. The last word I heard out of her mouth that day was her screaming, "Rehab?" literally just as I was leaving. She sounded like she honestly didn't get why I'd say that. I drove off to get some yellow curry from one of my favorite restaurants, and my sister started messaging me and asking me to please not ignore her. And then she actually said she didn't know she was such a burden on everyone. And it's like, seriously, she knows. She has always known that fact. She just has massive denial and main character syndrome. I blocked her that day and it was a massive relief to do so. She called our parents later and our mother told her she probably lost me forever. The only time I even let her talk to me as of late was because she wanted her mail. Now, my sister still came back and weaseled a bit more money out of us though, and I went out to eat with my parents and my sister showed up at the restaurant in tears. She got $50 from our dad and $20 from me. And at this point, we're pretty sure that all that money was going into her habits. Because before we kicked her out, she was borrowing from me when she already owed me hundreds and owes our parents and grandparents thousands. She then gave me the classic line that all addicts give out, "You know I'm good to pay you back." She wasn't even feeding her children, let alone paying her mortgage. Her ex-husband soon took the kids and refused to let her see them as long as her awful boyfriend was around. Then her boyfriend did end up going back to prison, and my sister has somehow been living off his disability money and gotten an apartment of her own. She also started dumpster diving and apparently found jewelry that she had sold to a pawn shop. Well, to top all of this off, my sister showed up at my house recently wanting her cat back, with the both of us getting into a shouting match and me kicking her off of the property. And just days after that, I had the cat chipped and I registered in my name. But honestly, I'm so done with my entitled sister because the way she treats my family is unacceptable. Wow, your sister is not a good person. I think I can confidently say that. She has screwed you guys out of money and time. She constantly is using everybody around you, and in my opinion, she is not grateful for any of the help that she's received. And this is one of those situations where it's like, oh, someone's showing me exactly who they are, and I think in this case, I really should believe them. Like, your sister literally was like, oh, mom's gonna pass away next. All because mom was trying to, like, what, get her a motel room, take care of her, and help her out in some kind of way? Like, what is going on? That is so crazy in my opinion. So seriously, hopefully you and your family can have a good life without your sister involved. Because based on what you described, your sister sounds like an absolute nightmare to be related to. An entitled Karen tries to steal my headphones and DVD player while I'm camping, claiming that her kid deserves it more so that they could stay entertained. But I simply wasn't taking that sitting down, so I got up and humiliated her in front of everybody at the campsite. Here's what happened. So I decided to go camping again for the first time this year because of spring break. And even though I only got the weekend to go, it was just enough to help me unwind, and I decided to go about this all by myself. So I had already spent one night at my campsite, and I was loving the fresh air, and fortunately the rain was minimal. That's honestly the only reason that I went. Otherwise, I'd have just stayed home, but I had an itch to scratch to get out and enjoy some mountain air. I was far from being alone, as the spaces around me were full of tents, as well as trailers and RVs. Plenty of people caught the camping bug during spring break just like I did. I was just sitting relaxed in a folding lawn chair and watching Tailspin on my portable DVD player. Yeah, I know it's a cartoon, and it's an old one at that, but I have enjoyed it since I was a kid, and I used to watch some old tapes of it when I was younger with my cousin, and I've also owned the DVDs of the complete series for about 10 years now. So I had my headphones on because other campers were playing music, they were barbecuing, and they were doing other things. I was just chilling and letting myself mentally zone out, all with a refreshing beer in my hand. And it was right about then that I got a sudden hard tap on my shoulder that frankly really scared me. I turned around to see a roughly middle-aged woman in her over-tight purple yoga pants with her hands on her hips. She didn't have the Karen haircut, but she did have the bleach blonde hair and overly large bug-eye glasses. I know in this situation, a lot of people will reflexively say, "Can I help you?" But that's just giving an opening to these people to say whatever they want. So my first reaction is to just angrily say, "What? Can't you see I'm trying to relax by myself?" When I said that, that kind of set her back for a second. She didn't go away, so I just paused the episode I was on and grumpily asked her what she was bothering me about. She spoke up in a matter-of-fact way that sounded like she was trying to be in charge. I guess she was trying to activate mom mode on a stranger, but I think the unfriendly scowl on my face was enough to show that I'm not exactly friendly. So she just pointed at the portable DVD player and said that she wanted to borrow it and the headphones for her daughter. Now, to make it brief, I said no. And no is a complete sentence. Because for one, I don't know her, and I don't know if she'll ever bring it back. And I certainly don't know if her kid would damage it in the process. Now, I do actually keep a backup smaller portable DVD player in the camper, but I wasn't gonna let this woman know that in the slightest. But that's when things escalated in a way that I honestly didn't expect, as this entitled Karen acted absolutely insane. After I said my complete sentence of "no, you can't have it," she certainly didn't take well to being told off, and so she then launched into a tirade about how I was a grown man watching cartoons, and how they only had one TV in their RV, and her daughter needs something to watch because her kids can't agree on what to watch, so she demands to have my DVD player. I coldly said that that was not happening, and she actually gave me a loud "why not?" So I pointed out to her that this really was not my problem, and she just crossed her arms and said that I was an adult, and I should be putting the kids first. So I said that would be the case if I had kids, but her kids are not my kids. I don't know them, and I'm in no way related to them, and therefore I have no obligation to them. So she rolled her eyes and then tried to offer me money for the headphones and DVD player. Admittedly, I didn't pay much for either of them, but I don't care. I wasn't interested in selling in the slightest. Plus, she only offered about $20 for both of them anyways. I just told her no and to kindly leave me alone to watch my movies in peace. Then I tried to just sit back down and resume the episode. Well, she didn't take that well either and proceeded to grab the DVD player right in front of me, as if I was just gonna let her walk off with it. I got up and stopped her, all while saying, "Ma'am, that is not yours." She proceeded to try and shove me over, try being the operative word. She clearly underestimated how heavy I am, since I don't look heavy in the slightest, even though I'm around 230 pounds. My body frame just kinda hides it well, and I've been in a few brawls in my life. I ended up grabbing her arms and shoving her back with little effort. She fell down into some wet grass and started yelling that I had attacked her, while looking around for for some kind of support. Now, I've read enough Karen stories to know where this one's going if I say nothing. So I yelled out as well that yeah, this lady attacked me out of nowhere and tried to push me over and steal my stuff. And at this point, there had already been a few people around us watching the whole altercation, and they had gone completely quiet just staring at us. So then I said to everybody, check it out, we've got a bona fide Karen here who tried to take my stuff for her precious little angel baby. Everybody clap for her. And you know what? They did. They actually started clapping. The Karen looked completely humiliated and stormed off, screeching that I'm a jerk. At this point, I tried to resume watching the DVD as I was, but I felt uneasy that the Karen might come back. She snuck up on me rather easily before, and I didn't want to risk that again. So I packed up and went back into my camper to continue watching and drinking inside. I got plenty plastered that night, and I remember giggling like a moron as I watched another episode. I stayed at the campsite for one more night, and I didn't see the Karen again until I was leaving Sunday afternoon. I saw her standing by her garbage-looking RV with a large fountain beverage in one hand and a dog leash in the other. It was one of those yappy little fluffball dogs too. She glared at me as I drove past, and I just waved at her and said, "Bye, Karen," all out my window. She threw her drink at my truck, but none of it got through the window. I could hear her yelling at me, but couldn't really make out what that stupid Karen was saying. I'm not sure what goes on in the heads of these people, but I understand this could have gotten a lot worse. Like that crazy lady sicking the local ranger on me or something like that. But I think the public humiliation was enough to make her back off. I can only wonder if the rest of the family is like that. And with that thought in mind, I'm really glad I didn't meet them. What an absolute psychopath. The fact that she tried to not only attack you, but also steal your belongings just to give it to her stupid kid is honestly incredibly insulting. I mean, it's almost like she was trying to get in trouble. And thank goodness people were watching and saw what happened. Because you know what? You're right. This absolutely could have gone a lot differently. And if you didn't have witnesses there, this entitled Karen very easily could have gotten you in trouble for something that you didn't do. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. I found out that my girlfriend of 4 years has been talking to other guys behind my back on a dating app. And I'm so upset, I seriously don't know what to do. So my partner and I have been together for coming up 4 years. For the longest time in our relationship, she's been quite a bubbly and happy person. And for the most part, our relationship has been pretty good. I started noticing the past couple of weeks that she has been acting distant, not being interested in me, and instigating arguments far more often than usual. And it's usually over minor things. On top of this, anytime she has been on her phone recently, she would go out of her way to sit as far away from me as possible and almost shield her action. And I'm presuming that she did this to stop me from seeing whatever she was doing. All this culminated in what happened tonight. So, with my girlfriend going to sleep earlier than me, as she usually does most nights, curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to snoop through her phone. Granted, I know this is an awful thing for me to do behind her back, but in the moment, I felt justified. And in fact, I've caught my girlfriend going through my phone while she thought I was asleep on more than one occasion, as well as accusing me of talking to other girls with absolutely no proof. And as it turned out, the first thing I see when I swipe down on her recently used apps is that she's using Hinge, a dating app. I honestly didn't know whether to feel shocked or vindicated in my suspicions. I still don't really know how to feel. Either way, it turns out she's been using the app for at least the past 2 to 3 weeks and has had conversations with upwards of 6 guys, most of which involve talking about planning dates or meeting up. So how on earth do I approach this situation? I'm very conflicted. I obviously just want to wake her up and scream at her. All that gaslighting and accusing me of cheating, and ultimately, she's the one talking to other guys. But I have so much invested in this relationship. We recently just put a deposit down for an apartment, and we also adopted a kitten together, which I have honestly just grown really attached to, and I really do love it over the past year. I don't know if I could handle breaking up and not being able to see my cat again. To add to this, she also talked about going to get married next year in Las Vegas, and she said this just last week. I'm just so confused why she would push so hard for that, especially now that I know she's been talking to other guys, which has been going on for at least the last few weeks. I mean, she's obviously been unhappy enough in our relationship to cheat, so why on earth would she suddenly want to get married? This is all so very confusing, and I seriously don't know what to do. I want to circle back to something the original poster said, and they said that they have so much invested in this relationship. And yeah, you're right, there is a lot that you've put into this that you want to not not lose all of a sudden, like the cat or the apartment or stuff like that. But you know who hasn't been invested in this relationship? Yeah, that's right, that's your girlfriend. She has literally been going behind your back and cheating on you. She plans on meeting up with other guys and trying to go on dates with at least 6 other guys. Like, clearly she's been pretty busy. And it's also not surprising that she's trying to accuse you of cheating because she was probably desperate to find some kind of way of getting the guilt off of her conscience of her actively cheating on you behind your back. And that in and of itself is not fair. It doesn't matter how much you've put into this relationship. You have obviously uncovered her true colors, and it is truly in your best interest to abandon the sunken cost fallacy and reevaluate everything you have to do with this lady, because getting married to her in Las Vegas is not going to solve anything, and instead it's just going to tie you down to somebody who clearly doesn't love you in the way that you love them. My boyfriend has just gotten a letter stating that he has to pay child support for a child from a relationship that clearly started right when we started dating, and I'm so hurt over this and I seriously don't know what to do. So to start things out, my boyfriend and I have been together for a year and a half. We first started dating in October of 2021, and initially we were both hesitant to get into a relationship quickly as he had fairly recently come out of a 6-year relationship. And from that previous relationship, he has a 2-year-old daughter. And on my end, I was overcoming my own mental health issues and lack of relationship experience. We took it slow and talked all day every day and went on days out and dates constantly over the next few months, including birthdays, New Year's, and exchanging Christmas presents. We had yet to make it official over these months, but obviously feelings were there with the intentions to build a relationship as we overcame things that we were dealing with together. However, in mid-January 2022, before I went away for a 3-day trip, he cut back all communication and we didn't see each other for over 2 weeks with the excuse that he was dealing with personal issues and had COVID. I was extremely hurt and confused by the sudden change of behavior when things had been going so well, but he reached out while I was away and apologized, saying he's been struggling with stuff and had been confused about us and had been worried that I might hook up with other men while he's on the trip, so that's why he withdrew. I reassured him that that wasn't something I would do and that I was committed to seeing where things went with him and with us, and I would not do anything to jeopardize that. He reassured me of the same thing, stating that he was falling in love with me. After that, things were amazing. We continued to build a relationship, and then in February, after downloading a popular online forum app on his recommendation, I found posts and comments on his account detailing how in December he'd been ghosted by a Tinder date, and then in January asking for advice on taking someone from Tinder on a first date. I was devastated, as that time we'd spend together meant so much to me, and he would reassure me that he wasn't dating anyone else on Tinder. I confronted him about it, and after a few days of hour-long talks and essay messages of him explaining what happened and me questioning his responses, I believed his story that the post from December was related to a much earlier incident from before we'd met, and that the date in January didn't go ahead because he had COVID, and that he'd only arranged it because he was confused about where we stood and whether or not we should continue dating. Due to a complicated family history with cheating, which he knew about, I did take it very personally, and while we hadn't made it official yet then, everything we'd been doing felt like a relationship, and we had said that we would take it slow to build up to one, so though it technically wasn't cheating to me, it certainly felt like it. But I decided to not end things and take his word when he swore on his daughter's life that he hadn't been with anyone since we started dating. In the year after that incident, things had mostly been amazing. Our relationship was official, and we fell in love with each other, and continued going on amazing dates and trips. In October, I finally met his daughter, which had been something we were both extremely anxious about, as I was hesitant to get into a relationship with someone who had kids, and he was extremely nervous about how we would get along. But things went great, and we have developed a close bond where she sees me as like family, and I really enjoy spending time with her. Overall, I was extremely happy. My boyfriend is a loving, caring partner who has helped me overcome my mental health issues and been very supportive. We talked of getting our own place soon and had ideas of what a family could look like together in the future. Well, fast forward to today, and after spending a lovely 2 days together with his daughter over the Easter holidays, he was called to his mom's house for urgent news, and I stayed behind to look after his daughter. When I returned, I could tell something serious had happened and assumed it was something to do with his mom, as I knew she had doctor's appointments that day. I went to console him, but he told me to listen first, which is when he told told me that a letter had been delivered for him at the house, and it was from CMS, stating that he has been named as the father to a child born in October of 2022, and he now needs to start paying child support. We were both shaking, and he told me he had no idea about the child, which is about 6 months old, or that the mother was pregnant, and that this is the first he's ever heard of it. I was in shock, but couldn't process my emotions properly, as his daughter was there, and I didn't want her to pick up that something bad had happened and that we were upset. After reverse checking the birth date in a conception calendar, I discovered the child would have been conceived during the time in January that he cut contact, which was 4 months into us dating. I questioned him about what had happened, and he admitted that he had spent some quality time with a friend of a friend during a night when he got inebriated, but also stated that he hadn't spoken to her since and had no idea that she had a baby, let alone that it could be his. He is going to do a paternity test, and he says the dates do line up, and remembering the type of person that she wasn't likely to be one to spend some quality time with other guys, so he's fairly certain the DNA test will be a match. He says he wants nothing to do with the mother or the child if it is his, and that he will just pay the second amount of child support and try and move on with his life, as he took the mother not telling him or reaching out as a sign that she doesn't want him involved. But I told him I don't think it will be that easy, and he has to deal with the consequences. He has asked me to support him regardless of the result, and to try and move past this together, and that he'll respect my decision and understand if I choose to leave if this test says that he's the father. I'm just heartbroken and so confused. I truly love him, and he's my first proper love, and I had just begun to really picture a life together with him. I love him and his daughter, and it will break my heart if I choose to leave. I just don't know what to do. I still love him, and my feelings haven't changed in an instant. I just don't know what my best option is. I have so many questions. I mean, did he really know she was pregnant and that the child could be his? Did he only just then find out the other day that the letter came through? Or did he know earlier and only told me when someone else found out? Can I trust what he's telling me when he's lied to me before? Can I move past my hurt and be supportive as he deals with this situation? And also, what would a future be like with someone paying child support for children from 2 different mothers? And do I even want that for myself? What should I do? I think it's pretty clear that your boyfriend has not been completely honest with you. He went behind your back once, so I don't blame you for not being totally comfortable with what he's saying, as well as for not completely believing him, because he's proven to be untrustworthy, and it's really unfortunate. You obviously see some kind of future with this guy, and you want to try to make this work, but his actions and his secrets really are starting to come to light, and hopefully you remember that when you make your choice moving forward. My boyfriend's mother is always picking on me and blaming me for everything that he does, and I'm so sick of this, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend's mother makes fun of me, my hair, and pretty much everything else about me, and I'm just wondering if I should even have a place in this family. I'm wondering if it's worth getting upset over this. For some context, my boyfriend and I have been dating for years now, and his mother has always been a general issue in our relationship. She's the type of person that cannot let go of her son. He just moved out, and she blamed me for him moving out and said that I should have stopped him. Or if he doesn't dress fancy, that's my fault too, and it's my fault for not forcing him to buy himself luxury clothing. If he's inside all day, guess what? That's my fault for not forcing him outdoors. Or on the opposite end of this, if he is outside too much, it's my fault for not forcing him indoors. If he's not eating enough breakfast, it's all my fault as well. My boyfriend is also a 27-year-old man. He's gonna do what he wants, and I'm not his caretaker. Apparently though, I'm also too plain and simple. Every time we all go out, she tells me my hair looks bad, my makeup isn't enough, my dress is plain, and I'm not doing enough. Basically, no matter what, she's always telling me I'm not enough. I stand up for myself, but she just keeps going and going. But here's the thing, my boyfriend's sister joins his mom in this behavior. I got called an embarrassment for not having him married yet. When they have an issue with my boyfriend, instead of going to him, they just go to me and they blame me for it. They are very judgmental in general, and they are not happy people. They literally act like the modesty police. I tell my boyfriend how I feel, but all I get is him saying, "Yeah, that sucks, but that's just how they are." I am now starting to wonder if this could escalate and if it's worth potentially ending the relationship over. Do I want to have kids and family ties with someone who is like this, as well as being so dismissive towards my feelings? Should I wait to see how the dynamics changes now that he has moved out first? I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or or if I'm just not thinking this through enough. But it's been about 4 years and I don't see it getting any better. This is apparently just who they are, and apparently these people just can't change. What should I do? Your boyfriend is being an absolute jerk. The fact that he's not coming to your defense and standing up to his mother as well as his sister and telling them, hey, back off. Stop blaming my girlfriend for everything and stop treating her so poorly, on top of all the other things that they're saying, is in and of itself incredibly toxic and dismissive. I really do not believe that people can just act like this and not change, because clearly you expressing your discomfort with them treating you horribly is doing nothing. They still mock and make fun of you and say that you're not good enough, and they treat you like garbage. And what is your boyfriend doing to try and mitigate this? Oh, he's just excusing their behavior. That is inappropriate and that does not help the situation. I know if I was in your shoes, there's no way I would keep that relationship going, because if he doesn't respect me now enough to say something about this, then you can bet there's no way he's going to respect you later on in the relationship. But with whatever you decide to do, hopefully it comes from a place of your personal comfort, because I agree with you. I don't think these people are going to change anytime soon, regardless of if your boyfriend moved out or if you two decide to get married one day. They are still going to be awful people towards you, and you will then be stuck with these people for the long term. And that, in my opinion, sounds like an absolute nightmare. An entitled Karen gets up in my face and starts screaming at me, claiming that I'm ruining her birthday, while also complaining to my manager at the restaurant I'm a server at. And I've never been more frustrated and angry at anybody I've ever served in my life. Here's what happened. So I've been a server for over 6 years on and off. I only work a few times a month now, as I have a full-time 9 to 5. I expected my worst serving experiences were behind me, but last night proved me wrong. I was very busy juggling 8 tables at once. I was literally running and sweating because of how busy it was. It all started when this woman asked for a side of butter, and I told her that I would go get it for her. I had to go to the bar and dropped off some drinks. She then yelled at me about the butter, even though it had only been about 45 seconds. I said to her that I haven't even been in the kitchen yet, but I was getting it right away. I ran to the kitchen, ran out her butter, dropped it, and ran back. Now apparently, I threw the butter onto the table. It is possible I didn't do it super gently, but it wasn't meant to be aggressive or anything like that. So as a result, she complained to the manager and told him what an evil person I was. He thankfully and frankly didn't care, but assured her that it wasn't malicious. And as a result, he just continued to tell me to be nice. I kept checking up and I said to them, how's it going? Is everything good over here? Let me know if you need anything. And they stayed mostly silent. At the end, I gave them the check, and after 5 minutes of her intently reading the check, I asked if everything was okay. And this is right about when she started getting completely out of hand. She said I ruined their entire night. She said how terrible and malicious I was, stating that my attitude ruined her birthday. She kept being hateful to a point where I just had to walk away and have my manager take care of it. Eventually, my manager took care of their bill and told her to leave. She then went to the front to berate me some more. And at that point, I finally couldn't hold it in and I just had an outburst. I looked at her square in the eye and I said, stop it. Please leave me alone. I have been nothing but nice to you. Just leave. And she continued throwing her nasty words at me and told my manager that I couldn't speak to her like that. My manager thankfully repeated exactly what I said and told her to leave as well. My coworkers also stepped in and demanded that she leave. Some customers joined in too after witnessing her behavior, as she tried to yell at me more that I was unprofessional while still being an absolutely terrible human being. All the tables around her assured me that I couldn't have done anything different, but I still feel at fault for some reason. I know this was an overreaction for her part, but I kind of feel unsafe and scared now. And the crazy thing is that her meal was already free since we do birthday meals. But apparently that wasn't enough. And while I didn't get any kind of tip from this entitled Karen, every table that witnessed it tipped me very well. So I guess as some kind of silver lining, this entitled Karen made me some money in the end. What an awful human being. Like seriously, this entitled Karen was completely out of line. She was not only being incredibly demanding, but it looks like she was coming into that restaurant basically looking to cause trouble with somebody, and the original poster just happened to be in her crosshairs. Like honestly, all the things that she was saying about this original poster is exactly how she was acting. She was the one being terrible and malicious, and she was the one who had an awful attitude the entire time. And I mean, her meal was already paid for, and she already got supposedly chewed out by the manager as far as she knows, so there literally was no reason to go up to the front and act like an idiot. The original poster goes on to say that some people really are just miserable, and this entitled Karen definitely fits the bill. So even though this is a temporary job that you do on the side, hopefully you never have to deal with this entitled Karen ever again, because her attitude and demeanor was completely inappropriate, and she was seriously being completely unreasonable the entire night. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My girlfriend gets irrationally upset and starts to cry anytime I go out to watch a movie or to watch TV with my family, and it's gotten to a point where this is seriously so annoying, and at this point I really don't know what to do. So this happened multiple times in the past where I have left a call with her to go do something on my own, and it's gotten to the point where I feel suffocated and that I can't do anything I want to do independently, and if I do, she just gets completely upset. I feel like a villain, and I don't know if this is justifiable. In the past, I would even watch an episode of Breaking Bad every evening with my family, which I eventually stopped doing because that was apparently excessive, and she felt like I was prioritizing a TV show over her, and it was a huge issue. So I thought to myself, okay, I can compromise. I asked her beforehand whether it's okay if I go watch a film with my family, and she said to me, I'm not gonna answer that, as if to say no. Then a few minutes later, she asked whether I'm going or not, giving me the illusion of choice, to which I finally say yes. I say I love her and I will stay on call with her just so she doesn't feel alone, but I got zero response, and then I heard sobbing minutes later. It was late at night, and I wouldn't feel like saying much to her anyways in my tired state, and she was probably going to watch YouTube and barely talk. A film would honestly be perfect. I hate it because I feel like I never have a choice, despite her illusions that I should just do what I want, which she will say in a super bitter tone. Now, I get that relationships are all about compromise, but I value my family time, and I'm in a call with her all day, every day without fail, so I don't feel like I'm being unreasonable. I could have just not watched the film and saved the drama, but then I literally never get what I want, which doesn't seem fair. This is all so frustrating, and I seriously don't know what to do. In my opinion, you are not being unreasonable, but in fact, your girlfriend is being way too clingy. For some context, both of these people are 18 years old, so she's an adult, and it's time to start acting like an adult. She should be able to entertain herself at times, and you honestly have an absolute right to spend time with your family without your partner having some kind of meltdown just to keep you attached to the phone. Like, that really does sound incredibly weird. This controlling behavior seriously sounds super exhausting, and if I was in your shoes, I would not put up with that for a second. And this might be one of those cases where she cries to try and get her way, and you just keep caving in and saying, alright, I won't do it. And this is over something so benign, like this is really not that big of a deal. You're spending time with your family. It's not like you're cheating or prioritizing anything. I mean, you literally spend every waking day with her in a call. It's not like you're not spending time with her. So maybe having some kind of conversation with her and explain to her that, hey, sometimes I'm going to spend time with my family, and that doesn't mean that I don't love you. It just means that I value my family time just as much as I value you. And if she takes that the wrong way, then that really is on her. You're not doing anything wrong by going out with your family, and I really would not feel bad about this in the slightest. My boyfriend expects me to comfort him when he's upset at me for seemingly unreasonable things, and I'm so annoyed and incredibly confused, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend is fairly sensitive and takes issues with many things I say or do to an unreasonable extent, in my opinion. During these times, he expects me to put aside my bewilderment and indignation at his getting upset over small things and blindly comfort him and shower him in emotional validation. This is extremely difficult for me because oftentimes I feel like he's being very overdramatic and unfair. Plus, I feel like I didn't do anything wrong to warrant his reaction and his need for comfort. For example, at my friend's wedding, they tossed the bouquet. I definitely tried to catch it by stepping forward and reaching out my hands. However, on my ride home, my boyfriend was upset and accused me of not trying to catch the bouquet, as well as being embarrassed or unwilling to be seen as wanting to marry him. He then requested I validate his emotions and understand why I should have made more of an effort to catch the bouquet. I was unable to do this as I was angry at him for villainizing me over something so trivial, especially when I did try to catch it. This led to an all-day fight, and this is a repeated pattern in our relationship. Another time, he was staying over at my place, and he said that he had to go back to his place later that night. He fell asleep, so I gave him some time to nap and then woke him up by saying, "You said you needed to go home, right?" And guess what? He took issue with this wording and said it made him feel like I was kicking him out. He said to me that he would have preferred if I prefaced it with something like, I really don't want to go, but, or something like that, and that he really felt like my words and my tones hurt his feelings. I simply couldn't validate his emotions in this moment because I was so upset that I was just trying to help him out by making sure he didn't oversleep, and yet he felt like I was being rude and expected me to atone for it and comfort him. I'm not sure what to do here. It's so hard for me to put aside my feelings and comfort him in these moments, and a fight always ensues no matter what. I know his feelings are valid, but when his anger is directed at me and I feel I did nothing wrong, it's impossible for me to be the bigger person and offer comfort. What should I do? I've got to be honest, your boyfriend sounds incredibly exhausting. I mean, you are basically walking on eggshells. That's basically what's happening in your life. And that sounds absolutely obnoxious. And if I'm being honest here, it doesn't sound like he's sensitive or anything like that. It sounds like he just likes to be controlling, and he basically wants you to bend to his every whim. And that's not fair in the slightest. Like, he's being very immature and incredibly childish. If I was in your shoes and he tried to be like, you need to comfort me right now, I would look at him square in the eyes and be like, no, I'm not doing that. And I really don't think you should have to. Like, you're not obligated to try and validate his emotions. If he wants to choose to get offended over stupid things, well then let him. Because the way he's acting is not normal for a 20-something-year-old. And you should not have to bend to his every demand, regardless of how he's feeling. My boyfriend thinks we have different values simply because I don't want to pick up hitchhikers. And it really has bothered me what he said, and I seriously don't know what to do. So first, a bit of context. My boyfriend has always been a traveler type, and we have both lived in a way that has put us in positions of being non-necessity hitchhikers ourselves in the past. And we both have picked up plenty of people from the side of the road. For me personally, I no longer stop to help people due to an incident that happened in 2017. Essentially, I welcomed in some travelers to take showers, use the Wi-Fi, etc. And let's just say my house burned down that night and I lost everything. It was awful. The altruism left my body that night and I feel terrible about it, but I no longer go out of my way to help people. I do not consider it a risk I can afford. This was when we started dating, so he's always known me to be against it, when actually I've been the exact same way he is my whole life up until that incident. Driving home from DC last evening, we saw two people walking on the side of the road and he started to slow down, and I was like, no, please don't. We don't have an inch of space in the truck, and we had the only two valuables I even have, my laptop and my iPad. He didn't stop, but made a comment about us having different values. Now, I'm fuming still today, and it honestly makes me upset that he would consider these strangers over me. But despite it all, I do feel terrible. I hate how horrible people are. I hate how rude and inconsiderate people are, and I've always tried to live in a way where I was never that person learning boundaries as I got older. I don't feel like myself with this level of misanthropy. I'm walking around with unconditional positive regard, just absolutely loathing people at the same time. And this is a personal value I am sensitive over, because I am not happy to have lost it. I don't understand how he is equating this to values. He is really easy to talk to, but I feel too angry right now to even try. Am I making this a bigger deal than it is? What should I do? First off, if your boyfriend wants to pick people up off the side of the road, he should do that when you're not in the car. And for him to even consider that with you in the car, after all the stuff that you've gone through, is, in my opinion, incredibly toxic. This is not a question of values, in my opinion, but instead, this is just your boyfriend being toxic. And honestly, let's get real for a second. In today's modern age of having ride-sharing apps, as well as having so many resources to get someone from point A to point B, I myself will never pick up somebody off the side of the road under the guise of, hey, I'm just trying to be a good person. Like, no, that's me being safe. People are crazy out there. There's no way I'm gonna pick up some random person. And after having literally your whole house burned down, after trying to do what you thought was the right thing to bring people in and say, hey, here's a shower, here's some Wi-Fi, you now have a very different perspective in life that your boyfriend clearly doesn't have. And I really think it's gonna take him losing everything for him to realize, oh, this isn't a value issue. This is just me wanting to be safe. And honestly, there's just no way I would ever feel safe picking up a hitchhiker. So in my opinion, picking up hitchhikers is a really good way to get yourself hurt. And it seems like he doesn't understand that risk, and it's gonna take something really bad happening in his life for him to realize, oh wait, this was probably a really bad idea. An entitled customer comes into our restaurant completely furious and angry, calling me rude and disrespectful, despite the fact that I have not done a single thing to him. And I've honestly never been more shaken up and more frustrated in my life. life. Here's what happened. So to start things off, there was a line out the door already before opening. We have a one party inside at a time while ordering rule for safety reasons. And it's not for COVID. We are running hot food outside all the time, and the restaurant is way too small to have a lot of people inside. The first party comes in, and the party after them tries to follow in, but I pointed at our sign, and I asked them to please wait outside until the first party is finished. Now, when I said this, the husband is already giving me an attitude and just rolls his eyes at me. This happens often, so I just kind of brush it off. They come in to order next, and I ask them if they want to order to go or if they wanted to stay here. So he answers for here. I then ask if they want to sit outside or inside, and he responds as if I'm annoying him by saying, "We want to eat here." I then repeat whether they want to eat inside or outside, because you can do either one, and his response did not answer my question. So he just raises his voice at me and says, "Obviously, I want to eat inside." I apologized to him after that, and I explained that I needed to ask these questions to seat them properly. I just continue to take their order, and I try to not let them bother me, as he is still giving me an attitude as I'm doing so. I handed the wife some napkins, some chopsticks, and a straw for their water, and the husband went to grab the straws, and I let him know I already gave his wife straws, and he just threw up his hands and sighed loudly. I was honestly so confused why he was being so rude to me. Mind you, all my coworkers are noticing his behavior and are questioning him as well. Later on, I see him trying to ask the chef something, so I asked him if he needed anything, but he just straight up ignored me. And when he did that, I assumed that he just didn't hear me. So I ask him again as he is walking towards the other side of me, looking for someone else to talk to. Clearly, he is ignoring me, but I'm the only one available as everyone else is busy. I start to get upset because I don't understand why he won't respond to me in the slightest, as he is trying to get another coworker's attention and ask for napkins. Despite the fact that everyone is behind me, I say to him, "Sir, do you need anything? I can help you." Again, he just completely and totally ignores me. My coworker hears this and looks at me confused. I had enough, and I say to my coworker, "Can you please give this man some napkins, since he is just being rude and ignoring my help?" I knew right then that I should have kept my mouth shut, but I felt so disrespected. And after I said this absolutely set him off and really made him freak out. He said to me, "I have not been rude. You have been rude since we walked in here." I simply say to him that no, I have not been rude to you at all, and you have been giving me an attitude since we first opened. Honestly, I can't really remember the back and forth because I kind of just blacked out, but I remember he asked me for my name, and I told him that no, I don't need to give that to you. Eventually, he went back to his seat, and I turned to my coworkers and said, "I need a minute." I went to the back and I started to cry. Thankfully though, they ended up getting their food packed and they just left. They left an awful review and it honestly crushed me. I have literally the best attitude every day. Customers tell me all the time how positive and great I am, and all my coworkers say it too. That day, I just couldn't handle the negativity. It was my first altercation in the 4 years that I've been working there. The review said I had a chip on my shoulder and should never work a customer service job ever again. Now, if there is a customer like this, we have to immediately switch positions to avoid it getting to that point. Honestly though, I just don't know why people are like this, because that guy clearly was incredibly rude, and it's so frustrating that I had to deal with it. Yeah, that guy was completely out of line. Like, he was seriously so mad that he couldn't go in there right away, and so he decided to take it out on you. That's literally all that happened here, and that's not fair for you. You've worked there for 4 years, and you've always been kind and respectful to everybody that comes in, but then this guy comes around and just completely ruins that streak. But you know what? That's a really good track record, especially when you consider that this was not your fault. This guy was just a weirdo, and honestly, I would just chalk this up as someone that will hopefully never come back again. My boyfriend wants to go 5 weeks traveling abroad with his ex-girlfriend, and I'm really confused and I seriously don't know what to do. So as the title suggests, my boyfriend wants to go to South America for 5 weeks in the summer. We're also from the United Kingdom for reference. He hasn't done heaps of solo traveling before, and it's quite a long trip to go on his own, especially somewhere so far away. I have work and I cannot take off, so it's definitely not an option for me to go. None of his mates can afford the trip and are really bad traveling partners based on previous experience. The only person who is really suitable to go with him is his ex-girlfriend. For some details about the ex, to be honest, they can hardly even be called an ex. They fancied each other for 2 years and went on a bunch of trips together. So because of that, they do travel really well together. Nothing happened between them because they both were a bit useless when it comes to making the first move, so it never really went further there during this time, but they were both interested. In the end, they were just really good friends who fancied each other. Eventually, they started dating, but my boyfriend moved away, so they were long distance for about 2 months. Their first kiss was 2 months into their relationship, and a few days later, they ended up breaking up. She broke up with him because her therapist told her it wasn't good for her to be in a long distance relationship right now. Since their breakup, however, they have remained pretty close friends. They've been on a couple of trips together since, and have kissed a few times since then, but nothing further than a drunk peck on the cheek from what I can gather. They remain super positive friends who text sometimes, they never really call each other, and they see each other when they happen to be in the same place. Now, this idea of his 5 weeks of traveling has come up, and I feel anxious at the thought of him going with his ex-girlfriend. Really, not a lot is happening between them, but I know they had a very close friendship for a long time, as well as an attraction on both sides. I feel as though 5 weeks spent with your ex who you fancied for so long is simply a recipe for disaster. Now, my boyfriend has never done anything to make me not trust him. He is very honest and we have amazing communication. We have spoken about this already and he understands and agrees with many of the points that I'm making. I feel like I can't tell him what to do or what not to do though, and I don't want to come across as a controlling girlfriend. The thought of this just makes me feel so anxious and I honestly don't know what to do. This is super sketchy in my opinion. This would honestly be a deal breaker for me. They had a fling together once or twice and they were previously in a relationship. Even if that relationship did not last, I wouldn't really care if they were good friends right now or anything like that. I personally would feel very uncomfortable with him going on this trip with his ex-girlfriend. Like in my opinion, I think the original poster's instinct is correct. This really could be a recipe for disaster, and I seriously think, in my opinion, that this would be a bad idea. An entitled Karen freaks out on Valentine's Day because she got a bouquet of flowers that she didn't like. Things got so bad that she threatened to call the police on my dad simply because she was so angry over the flowers she got. But it all backfired on her instantly as karma came in at the right moment and shut her down completely. Here's what happened. So my parents own a flower shop and have run their own shop since before I was born. So as a result, I was pretty much raised in their flower shop. Even as a little kid, I would help out on weekends by sweeping, emptying the trash can, or anything else they had going on. All in all, I really enjoyed it. That is until Valentine's Day rolled around every year. If you talk to anyone in the floral industry, they will tell you that Valentine's Day is a week-long nightmare. Everyone and their brother wants two things specifically. They definitely want red roses and only red roses, and they want it delivered to their significant other on Valentine's Day so they can stay out of the doghouse. The worst is when we would deliver the roses to an office building, which many customers demanded. The kind of woman who has to have roses delivered to their office are usually doing it so they can show off to the other women that they work for. To that particular breed, it isn't about the flowers or the love. It's about lording their relationship over the heads of the lesser women. And with that in mind, that's when we had to deal with a Kevin and a Karen. The Kevin in this story is the dumb, well-meaning husband, and the Karen is vicious and cold-hearted. Kevin called in first thing on Valentine's morning. I was answering the phone for my parents, and I was about 15 or 16 at the time. I was also writing down orders for them that they could then fill. When Kevin called, he was tentative and very apologetic about the late order, but rest assured, he didn't want red roses. This was good, because we had been out of red roses for a couple of days. Here's how he explained what he wanted. He said to us, "I want 7 yellow roses and 2 white roses wrapped up. Yellow is my wife's favorite color, and we've been married for 7 years, and the 2 white roses represent our 2 children." On the card, he had me write something along the lines of basically celebrating their 7 years of being together, and how his wife is beautiful, and how he's so happy that she gave him 2 precious daughters. Now, on any other day of the year, this would be a very romantic gesture, but on Valentine's Day, I knew this was going to backfire when he said he had to have them delivered to her office. I already had 4 orders going to that office building, so adding another one to the delivery route was not a problem. I double-checked that he wanted the 7 yellow roses and the 2 white roses, just in case he wanted to change it to a more traditional Valentine's Day dozen. But no, he was insistent that his order was exactly what he wanted and that his wife would love it. So I took his credit card information, I processed the order, and I moved on with my day. Later that day, a very angry-looking woman stormed into the shop, holding a bouquet of, you guessed it, 7 yellow and 2 white roses. Immediately, she demanded to speak to the manager, which was either of my parents. I got my dad and I sat back and just watched. As soon as my dad appeared, she laid into him. She screamed and and ranted about how stupid we must all be because there's no way her husband would do something as stupid as sending yellow and white roses on Valentine's Day. She accused us of cheating her, lying to her husband, and making her look bad. She goes on to say, "All the other women in my office got a dozen red roses in a nice vase. You sent me this garbage of yellow and white ones. They are all wrapped. Who in the world sends wrapped roses on Valentine's Day? You made me look like an absolute fool." My dad tried to calm her down, but it was no good. She then demanded that we refund her husband's money, and so trying to keep the peace, that's exactly what my father did. He found the order slip, refunded every last penny of her husband's order, and then she demanded a free dozen red roses for the inconvenience and the humiliation that we caused her. My dad tried to explain to her that we were totally out of all roses by this point. It was nearly 5 o'clock on Valentine's Day. We had sold our last rose a couple of hours earlier. At this point, another customer came in, so I stepped over to help him out. He was a young guy who looked very desperate. He asked in a very tentative and polite voice if we had any roses left because he had forgotten Valentine's Day was such a big deal. It was his first Valentine's Day with a girlfriend, and he wanted to do it right. While my father is busy getting yelled at by this entitled Karen and being told that he must be lying, he then overheard this young guy. My dad looks at the guy and says, "Oh, you need some roses?" The guy says, "Yes, please, if you have any. I don't care what color or how many." My dad then looks at this guy and says, "You're in luck. I have 7 yellow and 2 white. They are all yours on the house." And when my dad said this Karen's head looked like it was going to explode. She started screaming, "Oh, no you don't. Those are my roses." But my dad went right back at her. He said to her, "No, they're not yours anymore. You wanted a refund, which I gave you. They are now my roses, and I'm giving them to this nice man." The entitled Karen started screeching, and she said to him, "No, I refuse to not have roses, even yellow ones that are awful. It is Valentine's Day, thank you. Fine, whatever. Process the payment again if you have to, but I'm leaving with those roses." My dad looks at her and says, "No, you're not. Get out of my store now. You aren't welcome here." My dad then proceeded to hand the bouquet, which was still in perfect condition, over to this young man, as well as a box of chocolates for his girlfriend. My dad looks at the guy and says, "Happy Valentine's Day and have a great night with your girlfriend." This entitled Karen then looks at my dad and starts to shout, "I'm calling the police. This is theft." My dad looks at her plain face and says, "Go ahead, but do so from the parking lot. Now get out." The entitled Karen stammered for a moment before storming out. Now, I'm not sure if she actually called the police or anything like that, but thankfully, overall, we never saw her again, which considering her attitude was honestly a really good thing. I think the entitled Karen of this story falls under the category that the original poster described earlier, of people who only wanted these flowers on Valentine's Day so that they could show it off to their coworkers and be like, "Oh my gosh, look how much my significant other loves me." Like, come on, that's so weird. And this entitled Karen's husband literally asked for this specific thing. He wanted the yellow roses and the white roses wrapped together for his wife, and he even was pretty convinced that she would love what he was giving her. But clearly that backfired pretty quickly. Also, I have to say the original poster's father is awesome. They handled that so well, and all of the karma that you could possibly want towards this Karen came together in such a beautiful way. I mean, what are the chances that someone came in last second looking for flowers and he was able to give them to this guy in spite of this Karen? That is honestly such beautiful karma, and I can't think of a better recipient of that than this entitled Karen. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. An entitled customer announces to the restaurant that I don't care and that I am somehow ruining her birthday simply because somebody in the back messed up her order, and I'm so sick of dealing with entitled jerks all the time at my job. Here's what happened. So this happened the other night. A party of 16 comes in and everyone is nice for the most part. The first couple to get there nonchalantly let me know that they would all be on separate checks, and they then apologize saying, "Sorry, it's gonna be a pain." And I'm just thinking to myself, great, this is just what I wanted to hear. 16 separate checks. And before I know it, I'm getting drunk orders. I get to this one lady and she orders her drink and says to me, "This is my first day in 80 days that I'm drinking." And just because I didn't know what to say, I forced to laugh and I just smile and move to the next person. I take everyone's food order and eventually the food comes out. I'm making sure that everyone's okay, and the same lady lets me know that she hasn't gotten her food yet. I apologize and I let her know that I'm I'm gonna check on it immediately. And I thought that maybe someone just forgot to run it out, but that wasn't the case. It literally had not been made. So I begin to panic and I check the computer. I definitely did ring it in, so the cooks must have overlooked it. So I let them know that I need it on the fly like right now. I go out again to check on everyone, and each time I came out, someone needed something, usually just another drink. The lady that was without her food looks at me with a stupid pout on her face and says to me, "It's my birthday and everyone is eating except for me." So again, I just apologize, and she says to me, "Tell me, was it your fault or theirs?" Obviously meaning the kitchen. I'm not really sure what to say, as it really is not my fault, but with that in mind, she probably won't believe me. So again, I just apologize, and I tell her that yes, I rung it in. She just laughs and looks around the table. She then decides to make an announcement on my behalf. She says to everybody at the table that I don't care, and she says this as I'm standing literally right next to her. So I say nothing. I look at her and I walk away to go tell my manager, because I have a feeling this lady is going to be an issue. A 17th person of this party of 16 appears at some point, so I take his order, and his food just so happens to be ready at the same time as this other entitled Karen's food. I bring them over at the same time, dropping the man's off first because he is at the other end of the table. In retrospect, I should have dropped hers off first, since she had been waiting overall, but oh well. And even when I drop his off first, this entitled Karen yells across the restaurant, "Even he got food before me?" I then drop hers off literally seconds later and just apologize. My manager eventually and finally goes over to talk to them, and apparently the lady was telling her that she just wanted me to care, and it didn't seem like I cared in the slightest, which, you know what, she was correct. I did not care. But as a server, you always have to put on a nice face. Apparently, she told my manager that I had an attitude and that I had rolled my eyes. I have never gotten an attitude or rolled my eyes with any customer. I'm a star student of People Pleasing Academy, and I would never roll my eyes of all things, no matter how annoying someone is, because I would like to keep my job overall. The only other interaction I had with this entitled Karen was when I asked if her food was okay, and this was right after she spoke to my manager. She just smiled smugly and replied, "Yeah, it's great." Eventually, this entitled Karen's food and drinks were taken off the bill, and I've had a lot of rude entitled customers in my day, but this lady literally took the cake. The entitled Karen of this story was being very rude. She didn't get her food on time because somebody messed up in the back, and that negatively affected the server up front. They did their job. They did what they were supposed to do. They put it in the system, and the cooks in the back messed up. And that's one of the hardest things about being a server. Things getting done is literally in the hands of other people who may or may not care. And it sounds like the cooks in this situation definitely did not care. They messed up, and so the server is the one that got chewed out. And who is this server to seriously be like, "I just want them to care"? Like, I really find that incredibly toxic to do towards a server at a restaurant. Like, they literally are paid to care. They are waiting on you hand and foot, and they're trying to make sure your food is good and on time. This is literally just an extenuating circumstance where it was completely out of their hands. And seriously, in my opinion, after the age of like 21, if you seriously use "it's my birthday" as an excuse to be an obnoxious jerk, you are the one with a problem, in my opinion. This lady was turning 44 years old. Like, seriously, nobody cares. And in my opinion, you can't use that as an excuse just to treat everybody around you like garbage. An entitled customer leaves a horrible review for me, all because I told them that we couldn't serve any more drinks after 9:00 p.m. And as a result, my manager turns on me and tries to pull me into a disciplinary meeting, claiming that I didn't do my job properly. And I've never been more frustrated in my life. Here's what happened. So I literally just experienced one of the most infuriating and irritating experiences I have ever come across in my 5 years as a server. So to set the scene, it's a Thursday night, and 3 of us are on shift for the whole restaurant, including the bar. We close our kitchen and bar at around 9:00 p.m., give or take maybe 15 minutes. But people are free to order desserts and stay as long as they'd like, because desserts are just taken from a box, and it's rude to just kick people out. We also close them at this time because sanitizing the area and doing stock and closing procedures takes absolutely the longest time ever. It says on our website and Google that the business closes at this time, so people are fully aware. A table of 6 came in that had booked ahead of time at around 8:00 p.m. My manager then lets me know 5 minutes before that they'll be closing the bar at 9:00 p.m. and that I should go to the tables and ask whether they'd like to make any drink orders before before we do. It's very standard procedure and it's something we do for everybody. I mean, most tables have almost finished anyways, so they either don't mind or they give me their last orders. But when I get to this table, whose wine bottle was mostly full anyways, they look at me entirely shocked. They ask me if I'm being serious and tell me it's ridiculous. I apologize to them and I tell them that I'm very happy to help them out for the next 10 minutes, but it's out of my hands. They then start telling me that we should be serving drinks until our liquor license says so, which they know is 11 o'clock p.m. I leave to get dessert menus for them, and when I come back, the guy apologizes and asks if I'm okay. I relax a bit and I'm thinking that it's over, but that is a huge mistake. It's not. They ask me, what if we want a dessert wine? I reply that unfortunately, no drinks are available at any table. The bar equipment is sanitizing as we speak, and our official closing time is 9 o'clock p.m., which they were told on the booking. They tell me it's horrible business practice and they'll leave this in their review. I tell them they are free to do so, and there's nothing I can do to change the time that we close our services. They then call me a liar and that they don't want to have to pay any service charges or leave a tip. I mean, I get like 5% on their service charge anyways, and they're saying they don't want to do this because I'm lying to them. Now, I do not get paid enough to lie to you and put myself through grief. So I tell my manager that they've asked to have it removed, and when she asks why, I explain, and instead of speaking to them, she gives them an extra 20% off. Fast forward, and they seriously leave a 3-paragraph review the next day, calling me rude for not being accommodating. And here's the part that is seriously the most infuriating. They mentioned that they didn't even want any more drinks in the first place. They were just offended that they couldn't have any if they wanted to, and that I wouldn't make an exception for them. The assistant manager had to literally talk to the manager and talk them out of calling me into a disciplinary meeting because I was literally just doing my job, and I know for a fact that I did nothing wrong. Those customers are awful. They just literally wanted to feel special and feel like they could get some kind of exception. Like, how dumb do you have to be? And it really makes that 3-paragraph review just completely pointless. They're making up all these horrible things, and they're not actually offended by something that the server did. They're just mad that they didn't get their way, which is totally unfair for the server. They didn't do anything wrong. They were just doing their job. And what kind of manager would just be like, all right, just give them 20% off. Also, you're in trouble for doing this. Like, what? They didn't do anything wrong. What are you talking about? The server literally did exactly what they were supposed to do. They told him that the bar was closed, and they asked him if they had any other drinks they wanted to get. And that was that. I mean, there's no reason to punish this person simply because there was a bad outcome. So overall, it really sounds like the original poster just has a really awful manager, and it sounds like that's just not a good working environment. And trust me when I say this, you did not fail. But in fact, it's your manager that completely failed you and the restaurant. My boyfriend is asking me to work 3 days of hard work at his food truck without compensating me in the slightest. And I feel like he really doesn't appreciate me, and he's being really ungrateful of my help, and I seriously don't know what to do. So I've been with my boyfriend for over 2 years now. We love each other a lot, we make each other laugh every day, and are planning to move in together this year. My boyfriend owns a food truck and is very passionate about his food. When we first met, he was only cooking at home and was very apprehensive about having his own business. I've encouraged him over the last year while helping him apply for a license, helped him search for a truck, and over the last year, he has slowly grown a name for himself in the industry, and I'm so proud of him for following his dream and going for it. He was just accepted to one of the largest food truck festivals in the US, which is huge for him, not only in the money, but the exposure as well. It's difficult to get accepted, and I'm extremely proud of him. When discussing the festival with the festival showrunners, they stated that most vendors in the festival make about $7,000 in the 3 days that it's going on. The festival goes from the morning all the way until late into the night for 3 days straight. The truck is hot, the work is busy and non-stop. And I mean, it is work. Most weekends, I've helped him in the truck taking orders, helping any way I can, but this is much bigger and much longer than anything I've helped with before. In the year he's had this business, I've never asked him for any sort of payment because I've been happy to spend time with him and help out. It honestly hadn't even crossed my mind. Since this is a much bigger event and for 3 days, I have to take 2 days off of PTO from work just to help out. When I mentioned to my friends about the festival, they asked how much he was going to pay me, and I said he wasn't. They then said that he should be paying me something, or at least giving me something as a thank you. Recently, he got a new electric neck fan, which is a fan that hangs off your neck and it blows air into your face. And he has this for the food truck festival festival since it's going to be really hot. I asked if he got me one as well, and he said no. Now, I couldn't help but feel unappreciated as I'm also in the hot truck working for hours just like he is. And the neck fan is like, what, $20 maximum? I mean, come on. When the festival came up, I asked if he could buy us a couple's massage for the day after the festival, since we would have sore muscles from working, and it's something we've discussed for a long time about doing together. He said to me, what about dinner instead? Now, as some clarification, dinner to my boyfriend is not some fancy restaurant. It's a diner or a deli. I felt really dejected again, and I just felt unappreciated. My friends are saying that if it were them, they would insist on being paid for 3 days of hard work, or at the very least, be given a massage that would cost $200 max. When thinking about it, if the situation were reversed, I think I would offer my helper, girlfriend or not, a cut of the profits, since they are working as well. I don't want to get into a fight, but I also want to be respected and appreciated for my time and work. So am I being greedy for demanding to be compensated? What's the best way to go about doing this without us fighting? What should I do? First off, you need to understand that this is not a charity. You are taking time off of work to help him out with this, and with that, you absolutely expect some kind of compensation. And yes, you love helping out and spending time with him and getting to know him and seeing what he's passionate about. But that doesn't mean that you should have to sacrifice your time at work just to help him out for free on the weekend, regardless of what the event is. Like, think about it. He is asking you to take time off work and use up some of your PTO days, while also asking you to work long, hot hours in the kitchen, which is physically demanding. I mean, this is going to be very uncomfortable for several hours, and he's not working for free, so why on earth should you be expected to work for free? That is not fair in the slightest, and he seriously should be compensating you. So I really think he needs to understand where you're coming from. And you can do this in such a way where it's kind and nice and you're not being aggressive. Also, this guy is 31 years old. How does he not know that this is something you should pay someone for? And he is overall being very inconsiderate and ungrateful of her volunteering to help him out. And you can bet if you didn't show up to this event, he would be by himself facing all these people trying to get all this stuff done. So honestly, I hate to say it, but not only is he taking advantage of your service and your willingness to help out, but I think he actively knows it. I think he knows that he's taking advantage of you and that he sees you as free labor, which you absolutely don't have to be. You could even take the angle of being like, look, I'll happily help out, but I can't afford to take off PTO days and not get paid for this. I need some kind of financial compensation, and I need to make money from this, otherwise I simply can't do it. But however you decide to approach this, hopefully he sees where you're coming from, because that's going to be a lot of hard work for you to do for free. An entitled Karen stays at our restaurant for 6 hours, drinking throughout the entire day and getting more and more aggressive as time goes on. But after she orders one final cup of coffee to go and has to pay $2 for it, this entitled Karen freaks out and claims that she's going to put us out of business, all because we tried to charge her for something that she ordered. Here's what happened. So this is from a long time ago when I was still serving in a restaurant, but this story of mine came up yesterday, so I thought I would share it online. This particular tale took place while I worked at a casual fine dining chain restaurant. I came in for the dinner shift, and I inherited a camper. She had had lunch with a few of her lady friends around 12:30 p.m., but they had all left, and she stayed to have a couple more glasses of wine. My shift started at 4:30 p.m., so she had already been there for 4 hours. When I took her table over, the day server said that she already paid up, so I essentially was just waiting for her to leave. By this point, it's now 5 o'clock p.m. The dinner rush is starting, and her glass of wine is empty. She orders another and asks for the bill with it, which is no problem. It's not crazy busy yet, so I can get her the glass of wine and she can just pay. Fast forward to 6 p.m. and we're packed now, and she is still here. I'm asking her if she needs anything, and she asks for a cup of coffee and the bill yet again. So I get the cup of coffee and the bill and I drop it off at her table. It's important to know that up until this point, she had not shown any signs of intoxication. She just quietly sat sipping her wine and being on her phone. But this is when the garbage hits the fan. She starts telling me to get her exact change because there's no way that she's tipping me. Then her rage starts to build up until she's screaming at me about how dare I charge her for that cup of coffee. Don't I know who she is? She was claiming that I should have just let it slide, considering she's been there for 6 hours and I should have known she needed a coffee. And she should not have even had to ask me in the first place. She claims that she needs needs the coffee to drive home. I take this for a minute or two, and then I say to her, "Ma'am, I'm sorry you feel this way, but if you think you need a coffee to drive, then maybe you shouldn't be driving." And as you can probably imagine, when I say this escalates intensely. Her voice reaches nails on the chalkboard level, and then she shouts out, "I want to talk to your manager." Sure, lady, I don't get paid enough to deal with this garbage. I'll happily get the manager. My poor manager steps in and now stands there getting utterly berated by this woman, who's now showing her all the accounts and websites that she's going to rate us poorly on. She says she'll put us out of business. No one will ever eat here again. She also keeps throwing in that she's some important person who knows people that work in the hospitality business, and this is all in some supposed big shot hotel. During this time, I'm calling a cab. My manager isn't even trying to calm her down at this point. Nothing that we will say or do will heal the mortal wound that we have to deal with after we charged her $2 for a coffee, which obviously at this point we didn't care if she would pay for it. The whole restaurant is watching the show, and we literally just wanted her gone. She finally finishes up her red-faced screaming fest and heads for the door, and this is right where I'm waiting. I look at her and I say, "Ma'am, we've ordered you a cab," and that's when her rage falters for a moment. I look at her and I say, "We understand you're upset, and you've had a lot to drink. We cannot in good conscience allow you to drive home, and this is out of concern for your safety." Now my face is perfectly concerned and serene, but hers is red and splotchy. She storms over to the cab without a last word, because maybe she knew in the moment that she actually shouldn't be driving. Maybe she was too angry or drunk to realize that she chose the cab. Either way, I never saw when she came back to her car, and I never saw the copious amounts of bad reviews that she loudly promised us. And no, the restaurant never went out of business, especially not for charging someone for a coffee that they obviously ordered. Honestly, who stays at a restaurant for 6 hours? Like, this lady either had nowhere to go or she was down on her luck and she just wanted to get plastered. Like, seriously, the longest I will be at a restaurant is maybe an hour and a half if I'm pushing it. And that's also if I really want to be there. But most of the time, I'm there like what, maybe 45 minutes to an hour tops? Like, what was this lady doing all day besides just getting completely drunk? And she's been paying for her drinks all throughout the day. I mean, what changed when you had to pay $2 for a coffee? Is that really breaking the bank and breaking your psyche? Like, come on. And it's also comical that she tried to say, "I'm gonna put you out of business," all while waving her phone around with all these websites and accounts that she has. Like, seriously, that's just petty. I know if I was in the original poster's shoes and somebody did that, I probably would just laugh in their face. I don't know if I could just keep that in. So hopefully this entitled Karen never comes back, because her behavior was absolutely ridiculous. And in my opinion, she absolutely should be banned from the restaurant. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My husband met a nurse at a hospital, and I don't know how to feel about it because he's clearly looking her up online, and it's really started to bother me. Here's what happened. So I first want to say that this happened about 2 months ago. My husband's niece and sister had been in the hospital for over 2 weeks due to a house fire, and I will say that the both of them are thankfully fine. I never got to go because of my work schedule and taking care of our son. While he was there, he met one of his niece's primary nurses. Apparently she was cool, and they were into a lot of the same stuff. Mind you, he was there for quite some time, obviously due to the circumstances. I didn't know about him meeting this nurse, except for the fact that he said earlier on that people there were nice and they were doing a good job. Fast forward to when they're almost about to be released, I go out of work and I called him and I asked how everything was going because he was still at the hospital. He gave me the updates and we were just having a general discussion about what to have for dinner. He then says the following: "I feel like I can't ever make new friends that are girls without feeling guilty because I know how you would feel about it. So it makes me uncomfortable even having a conversation. When I would start thinking, hey, they'd make a good friend, I feel bad because I know they wouldn't actually ever be able to be my friend because I know that wouldn't make you happy, even though it's more of a you thing. I'm different than you because if you met a guy, I would be fine with you guys being friends. So it just feels like you don't trust me." Now, when he said this, I told him this was all very all of a sudden, and I asked him where this was all coming from. I asked him if he had met a nurse there, and he said yes, and that what he said is an example of it. Now, I don't mind him having friends that are girls. I really don't. He has a bunch, and it's all people who he's known since like the 8th grade. Plus, some of the friends are girls that he works with. So I have no problem with it. To me, it's all about how the friendship begins. How I feel is that there's there's no reason for her to be in his life other than for that time. I just wouldn't be comfortable with them just hanging out all together by themselves. Besides, having common interests, laughs, and all those things, I just don't see how it would be needed for him. He already has a ton of really close friends. I also know he would never be okay with me being like, hey, I met a guy and we hit it off as friends and we exchanged numbers. Like, no, it's just honestly hurtful. Maybe I'm out of pocket for thinking this way, but he's married to me. Like, what am I not fulfilling in your life that you feel the need to find elsewhere? Or what's so great about her that you have to and want to have her in your life so bad? I'm not saying that she's not cool. I'm sure she's super sweet. I'm just not sure what to think of the situation. Anyways, all this happened about 2 months ago, and tonight and yesterday, I looked through his phone. I know this isn't very trustworthy or cool of me, but nonetheless, I did it. The nurse was in the search bar. Not only is she completely his type, but she has a bunch of revealing photos on her page, which is good for her. I'm not putting her down or anything like that. But my problem is that he had searched for her multiple times. Like, he's continuously gone back to her page. She's beautiful and much prettier and fit than me. I'm also curious as to how he found her Instagram. Like, did he stalk her Facebook and go through a bunch of people just to find her? Also, why did he need to do this? I get maybe wanting to see if she's doing okay since their encounter, and maybe that's all it was. But I don't know, I just feel sad and hurt, and I honestly feel like I'm not enough. And now I'm wondering if he was flirting with her at the hospital and started feeling guilty because he knew what he was doing wasn't cool, and then in return made it about how I'm the problem because I won't let him have new girlfriends or something like that. I don't know. Am I completely overreacting? Is this really nothing and I'm making it bigger than it needs to be? What should I do? I think it's really super sketchy that he's searching up this nurse and that he did this multiple times at that. And it also does kind of connect the dots that he's trying to shift the blame on you by saying something to the effect of, oh, well, you just never let me have friends who are girls. Like, no, that's not what's going on here. I mean, it really does kind of add up that yes, he definitely has some kind of interest in this woman, but that might be as far as it went. Because from the sounds of it, all he really did was look up her profile a few times. It doesn't really look like he's talked to her or flirt with her, or at least you don't have any evidence of that in the first place. And in my opinion, if you don't have that solid evidence saying, hey, you're clearly taking things too far and you've crossed a line that we need to talk about, I personally would just not want to jump to some conclusion that would cause some kind of rift between the two of you. So hopefully when you talk to him about this, he can understand where you're coming from, because it sounds like there's a lot of insecurity that you have about this lady and you feel like you're the odd one out. Today, I messed up by waking up mid-dental procedure and proceeding to try and fight the entire dental staff, and I've never been more embarrassed in my life. Here's what happened. Okay, so before I go any further, I want to first start off by explaining that as a foster child, I had an extremely awful experience with a particular dentist. He was very mean and he always hurt me, and I didn't really have anyone to turn to because my foster parents either didn't care or didn't believe me. As a result, I have extreme anxiety about going to the dentist, and I generally prefer to get completely put out for anything more major than a filling rather than sit there for hours having an anxiety attack. Now, this isn't my first experience of reacting wildly to sedatives, but it is my most embarrassing one for sure. There were no outbursts the last time I was sedated at the dentist, although I did keep waking up and trying to vape until they took my vape away from me. I was told I accepted this readily, so I didn't make a fuss and I just laid back down. Also, previously, after a knee surgery, I found my phone on the ride home and I texted a few of my more shiftless coworkers and I told them exactly what I thought of their efforts. Luckily, we're all friends and I'm not the hold back anything kind of guy, so they'd already heard it all before. They just thought it was hilarious and made fun of me about it for a couple of months. In reality, when I'm not full of sedatives, I'm not the same jerk, and I'm more likely to offer help than complain or judge, even if I do talk garbage while I do it. Unfortunately, today's experience might take a little bit more walking back on my part. This time turned out a little different. In fact, maybe a lot different, because this time I really messed up. Before the procedure, I tried to remind them that it takes a surprising amount of sedatives to keep me unconscious, but they decided to be safe and just go with the minimum to start with. This meant I wasn't fully out, but I was chill enough to just zone out to music and mostly not mind what was happening, at least until the point that I decided I did mind. In fact, I minded very much. After a little while of dozing in and out of twilight sleep, the dentist started doing some weird thing where he would jerk on my cheek very hard as he pierced my gum and jaw with what felt like a needle. Later, they explained this as a distraction from the pain since he was using a syringe to inject local anesthetic. But at this moment, it didn't matter what he was doing. I had had enough. I suddenly jerked my head a little bit when he jerked my cheek for the 4th or 5th time, and the needle went into the tip of my tongue, instantly numbing one side of my tongue. Really, it was my own fault, but I was in no condition to accept that. I don't really know what I thought in the moment, but I know that I was not thrilled. I pushed my very kind dentist and at least one other person away from me. I stood up and I started yelling and swearing at everyone, swaying around drunkenly, screaming God knows what. I was so dizzy. I'm not sure if I understood what was happening at all. I edged my way around the room until my back was against a wall so no one could sneak up on me. By now, there was an uproar, and probably 5 or 6 staff members were there in front of me with wide eyes and hands held out in front of them, begging me to chill out. I have no idea what I was saying, but I ranted the entire time, a good few minutes at least. I know I said I was upset, but there's no reason to jerk on my cheek if I'm sleeping, because if I'm sleeping, you don't have to disguise the pain, and anyways, I'm 40 years old. You're not fooling me. Just give me the shot and save your cheek pulling games for children. At one point, the very sweet technician asked me if I had had caffeine or Adderall or any other kind of stimulants in the last 24 hours that would keep me awake. This also offended me for some reason, so I started ranting about that too, and I did this quite loudly at that. On and on I went, backed up against the wall with my fists up in front of me, swaying like an alcoholic. There was a wedge in my mouth holding my teeth apart that at some point I took out and threw away myself. I was still attached to the blood pressure machine and I was jerking it around. Someone had to hold on to it to keep it from tipping over. All in all, it was very, very ugly. Eventually, the reality of the situation started to dawn on me. I realized that I was surrounded by dental staff who were 75% kindly older women, all of them watching with horrified expressions as I reeled around drunkenly, bouncing my 250-pound frame around and screaming blearily from behind clenched fists. As it dawned on me, I calmed down, and because I actually like them all very much, and they're always kind to me, I was able to pull it together and sit back down. They gave me more sedative, and eventually I passed back out, and by the time I woke up, it was time to go home. I didn't really remember a single thing about the appointment in that moment. I was just ready to go home and go to bed for a few hours. Fast forward to the evening, and I'm now finally sober enough to process thoughts. I just got a voicemail from the dentist about 12 hours later, very cautiously inquiring into my well-being, which brought that flood of half memories back to my mind. I am very embarrassed. This is my first dentist that I have had as an adult, as well as my first dentist that I returned to, and I was really hoping for it to be my last dentist as well. Hopefully they take me back. I plan to go down there tomorrow with some flowers and a very heartfelt apology, and hopefully they'll make note of it in my chart to throw in a little extra sedative next time they have to put me out. That really is an awful situation. You already have some very serious problems when it comes to going to the dentist based on previous experiences as a child, so I really can understand where you're coming from, where you would freak out and start acting really crazy, even though you were kind of under the influence of the sedative and you weren't completely out in the way that you hope they would have done. So I think apologizing to them really would be a good idea, but you also need to understand that you're probably not the first and you definitely won't be the last person to ever act like that at the dentist. I think they probably understand that you weren't completely all there and you were just acting on instinct based on what was going on around you. So I just wouldn't beat yourself up over this. I really would not consider this your fault, and I think having an honest heart-to-heart with the dentist would probably clear all of this up pretty quickly. My girlfriend and I have 2 different weddings that we want to attend for people that really mean a lot in our lives, and those weddings happen to fall on the same day, and now I'm not sure which wedding I should go to and how I should approach the situation. Here's what happened. So I realized that my girlfriend's best friend's wedding and one of my good college friends' weddings fall on the same weekend. Now, I had wanted to go to my friend's wedding. I booked a hotel, told my friends I'd be there, but I had not yet RSVP'd. Then about 2 months ago, we realized both weddings were on the same weekend. I wanted to go to my friend's wedding, and my girlfriend is 100% going to hers and wants me to come along with her since it is her best friend. Then I told my girlfriend I was leaning towards going with her to her friend's wedding, but now I'm having second thoughts. I never told my friend I wouldn't be going to his, and I also led my mutual friends to believe that I'd be at his wedding. For context, my girlfriend and her friend have been very good friends since childhood and became best friends in college. There's some family history too, as their grandfather were best friends, and my girlfriend's parents are going to the wedding as well. My friend and I are relatively close, and we have what I'd call a meaningful relationship. He's my fraternity brother, and I've known him for about 10 years. We live in the same city, and he's one of my good friends in the city, but we don't talk weekly or anything like that. I see him once a month or so. My girlfriend and I go to shows with him and his fiance together on occasion, and the both of us share a lot of common interests. There are people I'm friends with in the city who I really wouldn't care if we grew apart, but he isn't one of them. He's a good friend, and I've confided in him about things that I haven't felt comfortable telling other friends. This is tough for me because I have 3 weddings of fraternity brothers coming up. If this wedding conflicted with either of the other 2, I would pick my girlfriend's friend's wedding over them. However, I feel like this particular wedding is different, and that my friendship with him is different and far more meaningful than the other 2. For context, I talk to the other 2 guys maybe a couple of times a year. One lives in my city and the other does not. Now, my girlfriend's argument for why it's so important for me to be at her friend's wedding is that she knows with near 100% certainty that her friend and fiance will be in our lives forever. My girlfriend and I have been together on and off for almost 6 years. We don't currently live in the same city as them, but they are still very good friends. She doesn't know with certainty that my friend and his fiance will be in our lives together, and I guess I don't either, which I suppose is fair, but who knows? Nothing in life is certain, in my opinion. My girlfriend said me missing her friend's wedding would be like her missing the wedding. I've known her friend in some capacity for as long as I've known my girlfriend. Same thing with my girlfriend knowing my friend. I'm not directly friends with her, but I like her and her fiance, and could see myself as being lifelong friends with them as long as my girlfriend wants to. Comparing my girlfriend's friendship to mine and my friends, I'd say they are best friends, while my friend and I are good friends with a meaningful relationship. The whole situation gives me a ton of anxiety. The idea of picking one wedding over the other, wondering what if it doesn't work out with my girlfriend? Will I regret not going to my friend's wedding? Will my friend be mad at me for not telling him sooner? Should I be going to my friend's wedding instead of my girlfriend's wedding? With all these questions in mind, I've been avoiding it all. I always do stuff like this, and I dig myself into a deeper hole than I otherwise would have been in because the anxiety caused me to shut down. I feel like an idiot. And now the wedding is a month away. I haven't reserved anything to my friend, and he texted me yesterday asking if I got the invite and if I was planning on bringing my girlfriend. I nearly had a panic attack when I got the text message. Now, my friend is pretty understanding, but I feel like declining his wedding invite a month out might just test the limits of that understanding with him and my other friends. I don't know. I would also inevitably upset my girlfriend for changing my mind and putting her in a tough spot a month before her friend's wedding. I really feel like I messed this one up, and I seriously don't know what to do. In my opinion, I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't go to this wedding and your girlfriend goes to the other one. You both have good reasons to go to your weddings, and it's just unfortunate that they fell on the same weekend. They are just weddings after all, and I honestly think you're overthinking this and she is overreacting from it. Like, this is literally a situation where there's nothing you can do, and I think going to one or the other exclusively is only going to make somebody upset. But what isn't happening is not making a decision. You need to sit there and say, okay, I'm either going to my girlfriend's thing or I'm going to the wedding that my friend is having. Make a choice. Putting it off is not going to do any good for you, and it's only going to cause you problems if you sit there and do nothing. My entitled, spiteful fiance tries to make it look like her best friend husband is cheating, all as some kind of weird, complicated revenge scheme for something that was honestly so minimal. And now I'm considering breaking up with her after seeing this level of craziness over something so minimal, and I seriously don't know what to do. So a little over a year ago, my fiance attended a hiring event for an office job with one of her friends from high school, and she said it would be fun to work together. I also have an office job, but it's in a different company. They both received the job and seemingly enjoyed working together, and they would often go out afterwards if their shifts lined up. A few weeks ago, Sarah applied for a vacancy as a supervisor. Sarah is my fiance, and Sarah is not her real name, but unfortunately she did not receive it as someone else got it. She said that to her friend Jane, also not her real name, who shared in her disappointment, and they've been friends longer than we've known each other, going all the way back to high school. And that fact in and of itself is honestly why I was so surprised by Sarah's behavior. Sometime after the vacancy had passed, Jane told Sarah that she was accepted for a government job she applied for over a year ago. But when Sarah asked why she didn't tell her, she said she applied for it around the same time that Sarah applied for the office job, among many others. And also that the government openings are sometimes posted for a year and take a lot longer just to get back to you. And Jane didn't think that she would get it, but it offered yearly growth in terms of pay grade steps. And she encouraged Sarah to attend an upcoming direct hiring event. But Sarah was not happy about this because she vented to me about it and had some very choice words to say. When I asked why she felt this way, she said that she was hurt that Jane didn't tell her about this and didn't say that she applied, despite calling it a long shot at the time. But when I reminded Sarah that Jane applied for a lot of jobs while also applying for the office job that they got together, she said that she felt betrayed and that she didn't want to talk about her anymore because she wanted some space for herself. She also said that they told each other everything since high school. I also wanted to add that Jane took her out to dinner to console her after she didn't get the promotion, so I thought I would try and do the same thing by ordering from her favorite restaurant just to try and cheer her up. And at the time, Sarah said she appreciated that. But what she did next, after wanting space from Jane, made me reconsider our relationship altogether because I have never seen this side of her ever in my life. Sarah then began signing Jane up for all these spam sites that she had found in a Google search, and she was using Jane's email to sign her up. She eventually also confessed it to me too. Now, I'll get to that later, but what she did next was way worse. Sarah then tried to frame Jane's husband by going to a site that hired entertainment for parties or corporate gatherings and tried to frame her boyfriend for looking up certain types of dancers, if you know what I mean. She used his email when making an account on the site, and she made inquiries asking for quotes while pretending to be her husband. I found out about it when she asked me to do something on her phone, and the site was open in another tab. I asked her about it, and she didn't hide it at all. She literally told me all of this, claiming that it's because Jane betrayed her, and I was honestly stunned when I heard this. When I asked why she thought it was okay to do that, she said she did similar things to people in high school who she didn't speak to anymore because it simply helped her vent. I told her I was pretty disturbed by how calculated it was, and I told her that she needs to confess to Jane for framing her husband as well as potentially causing problems. She said that I was overreacting and that it helped her stay in an even keel. And I never even knew of this secret hobby, as she put it, until right now. She told me to drop it because she barely talks to Jane anymore, but I'm leaning towards calling her myself and confessing what Sarah did to her and what she was trying to do to her marriage. I also know that will probably make Sarah feel like I betrayed her too, but I'm just too stunned by this secret hobby that she claims that she's done to other people that she doesn't talk to anymore. I asked her again on a different day to confess, but she said no for the second time and refused to see any fault. She also said that our relationship would be done if I took Jane's side because then it would show I'm not on hers. I just want to ask if I should call Jane firsthand before breaking up with Sarah, as I'm seriously considering doing that. This behavior is honestly so disturbing and I seriously don't know what to do. Your girlfriend is actually crazy. She got upset because her friend got another job without her. That is literally all this is about. And her way of fixing that is to try and ruin this lady's marriage. Like, what in the world is happening? That is such a crazy step in the wrong direction. I really just don't even know what to say. But I think your instincts are correct. You plan on breaking up with her and you want to get away from this crazy toxic behavior because this seriously is not normal. And the sooner you get away from that, I really think the sooner you will be better off. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for yelling at my boss because she tried to blame me for her mistake? So I worked and legally am still working for my former trainer. I'm riding horses and I started learning how to ride a horse 7 years ago on one of her horses. Back then, everything was fine. She was a good teacher and everything, but last summer things started to get messed up. For some context, I started working for my boss as a trainer part-time and made quite a lot of money, but a few months ago, things started to go south. Everything I did was wrong and I was a bad trainer. Once, I accepted a job for some day like a month forward, and she didn't give me any details about it until it was hours left before the day I was supposed to be in work. And because I was working when I was needed, I didn't have a set time when I was supposed to be there, so I assumed that she gave that day to a different trainer and just forgot to tell me. So I made plans for that day, and that day in particular was a sunny day. I was in school and I had scheduled a training with my current trainer for tomorrow, and then she texted me in the middle of a lesson that I'm supposed to be at my workplace at the time I had my training scheduled. So I texted her about it, and in my own way, I yelled at her over the text message, and she started blaming it all on me. Later, I called my mom and told her what happened and left things to her, and that was honestly the best thing I could have done. My parents informed me via text messaging, and my mom called me once the things were kind of resolved. My mom called my boss and told her that I can't go to work tomorrow because of my training with a new trainer, and then my boss started to blame it all on me again. But my mom was furious. My mom found out that she was on a vacation and got back that day earlier in the morning and apparently had no time to make a schedule. My mom also told me that when she ended the call, her boss was very surprised because she has never seen her yell like that. That day, I had to cancel my training and go to work. Thankfully, my new trainer had no problem with that, and we had the training next week. Me and my mom reread mine and my boss's agreement about the job, and we found out that the agreement was illegal and that I wasn't supposed to sign it. But we let that, as well as a ton of other things, just slide. Things didn't really end up well, and we didn't break the agreement, so I still legally work for her. But it really begs the question, am I the jerk or is my mom the jerk for yelling at my boss for what she did? I don't think you're the jerk at all. Your boss literally came back and said, okay, time to work. Like she didn't give you any kind of notice or be like, okay, I need you here at this time. Instead, she tried to spring it on you last second, but since you heard nothing, you naturally made other plans. And if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing. If anything, your boss is being the jerk. They're being weird about this and they're trying to blame you for something they didn't do. They even admitted that they had no time to do the schedule, even though they got back from vacation and easily could have planned this before their vacation. So I seriously wouldn't worry about this. You and your mom didn't do anything wrong, and honestly, you should just be happy that your mom is looking out for you and making sure that you don't have any trouble. I feel trapped in my relationship with my boyfriend who gets angry over such small things and really will freak out over just about anything. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years now. At the start, it was wonderful. He was in a local band and we met at one of his shows. We hit it off instantly and began dating soon after. As a few months went by, he got into problems with his parents, and his mother kicked him out for being too violent. He was crying and saying none of it was true, and I believed him and took care of him. He went on to live in a friend's house and didn't have a job for months outside of his band. I paid for everything and tried to look out for him since I knew he was struggling, but despite this, he'd get snappy with me and aggressive. Every fight that we'd have, it'd be him shouting at me and calling me names, and I'd just sit there crying, begging him to stop. Then the next day, it'd go back to normal. About a year ago, a new girl joined their band, and he instantly clicked with them and even went to her house the next day after meeting her to help her practice without telling me. She's the exact opposite of me, but also shares all the interests with him that I don't. To this day, their friendship is still a cause of stress, as he actively hides and lies about messages from her to me, which he admitted to as well, stating that he didn't want me to get anxious about it. But even after he promised not to do it anymore, I still notice him not opening her messages when I'm beside him, but when I leave the room, he does it anyways. He actively asked her to hang out and lies to me about who he's making plans with. He had been texting her late at night whilst I'm on the phone to him. It's driving me insane because I know he's lying, but if I bring it up, it gets twisted to me being crazy. Recently, we got into a fight where it ended with him shouting at me. He said to me, "You never think before you do anything. I swear I'm just gonna snap one day." And when he said this, I felt scared, and I sat there crying and saying I'm sorry. And the reason this fight happened in the first place is because I accidentally banged into him when reaching for my phone, and he was in a bad mood. When I brought it up a week later, he tried to convince me he never said that because he would never say anything like that to me, and that there was no chance he said that because he didn't remember. But then later he says he does remember saying it, but it was only a joke. But I know that it fully wasn't. This is where I just feel so trapped. All my friends are through him. We live in a small town, and I do really love him. I've put all my energy into looking after him, and I'm second guessing myself every day because I keep thinking maybe he's right, and maybe I am overthinking or being crazy. I'm just scared, and I have been in this cycle with him for so long, I don't know what's normal anymore. anymore. I've become so depressed and drained recently as a result, but I can't bring myself to leave him because every time I end up getting too emotional and changing my mind. I'm just here as a last resort looking for some advice. What should I do? Your boyfriend sounds like an awful boyfriend. Let me make sure I get this straight. He's texting another girl who you have actively said, hey, I don't like that and I don't want you texting her. And now, since he knows that you don't like it, he has to do it behind your back and in secret. Also, as a side note for the listener today, when the boyfriend said, I'm gonna snap, he also said a veiled threat along with that really raises some red flags. This guy seems like an absolute jerk. He seems very unhinged, and I would hate for him to freak out one day and possibly hurt this person. So if I was in your shoes, all things considered, I would absolutely break up with this guy and get out while I can. For better context, the original poster is 18 and the boyfriend is 19 years old. He does not sound like a stable individual, and I think for your own safety, it would probably be better to at least get some kind of distance from him. Also, your partner is literally gaslighting you and making you second guess yourself on everything. One week, he's screaming at you saying he's gonna snap, and then the next week, he tries to push it off as some kind of joke. But you know what's actually happening. You know how bad it is, and seriously, you do not deserve this. I went through my fiance's phone while he wasn't looking, and I found out he is actively plotting to cheat on me, and now I seriously don't know what to do. So I really need some advice. I have been sick to my stomach after going through my fiance's phone, and I don't know how I should handle this. We've been together for 5 years and engaged for 1 month. We both live with our families and are saving for a home. For a bit of backstory, in 2021, we both decided to enroll in school. I started my doctorate degree, and he went back to complete his bachelor's. Most of my program is online, so I have made a few new friends. However, it is difficult to form relationships without being in the classroom setting. On the other hand, he is on his campus 4 to 5 days a week and made many new friendships. At first, I was happy for him, but then I became a little bit jealous. The next few semesters, he would make his class schedule so he could spend more time on campus and hang out in the study room with his new friends. He created an Instagram so he could keep in touch with them, even though before this, he used to be so against Instagram as a whole. They even invited him to go out drinking and partying with them. He considered going until I told him that I thought it was a little bit weird for a 35-year-old man to be hanging out with 19 to 22-year-olds. He has gone to dinner with them on 2 separate occasions to celebrate one of their birthdays. Fast forward to this weekend, and I was at his house, and I decided to go through his phone while he was sleeping. It was a big mistake, and I regret doing it. I saw things that dropped my heart into my stomach. The first issue is that he is messaging a girl from his school. He mentioned her when he first started school and said that she sort of resembles what our daughter would look like because she is biracial and we are an interracial couple. He always says, they're like my kids, because he is so much older than them. After looking through his phone, he has messages on Snapchat, Instagram, and regular messages with this girl he considers his daughter. All the messages have a flirtatious tone. The girl has sent messages saying, I missed you, as well as, I'm working out, how did my butt look today? He deflects the questions and says things like, I miss hanging out with the group as well, or saying something like, I don't look at your butt because you're like a daughter to me. Although he deflected her advances to turn the conversation into a more flirtatious tone, I feel like it's only a matter of time until it goes a little bit further. The next issue I saw was a conversation between my fiance and his friend that took place in May of 2022. His friend is married, and we even attended his wedding a few years ago. In the messages, they mention how they want to sleep around with a lady of the night, if you know what I mean, and how his friend wants to turn off the Ring camera at his home and cheat on his wife when she leaves to visit her parents. In those messages, my fiance said that if he lived alone, he would have brought a lady of the night over to his house and spent some quality time with her, if you know what I mean. And when I saw this, that absolutely broke my heart. During that time, we were very busy with work and had finals for school, so we couldn't see each other for like 5 weeks. He always came off as very understanding of our busy schedules and would always reassure me that although we couldn't be together every day, our love would carry us through. I sobbed for 2 days straight after going through his phone. I always felt like we had a fairy tale love and that we were perfect for each other. Now, I feel like I don't even know who I am dating, and it all has been a lie. I know I shouldn't have snooped through his phone. We've been engaged for less than a month, and I don't know how I should handle this situation. Should I bring this up and admit that I went through his phone? Is ending my engagement too extreme? I can't speak to my family about this, because if I decide to stay, I don't don't want this to ruin their relationship with him. Every time he says, "I love you, I miss you," or hugs and kisses me, I feel like he is just a big fat liar. Where do I even go from here? What should I do? If I was in your shoes, I would be thinking twice about this marriage. This guy was plotting to cheat on you, and he was sending this actively to his friends. And this is in advance to your wedding, and I am right there with you. There is no reason that your fiance should be messaging these women. And the second they started to make advances of them asking, "How does my butt look?" that's when all communication should have stopped, and he should have been like, "Hey, this is weird, and this is not what I want. This is going in a direction that violates my future marriage." I know if I was in your shoes, I would absolutely bring this up and be like, "Hey, yeah, I looked through your phone, feel free to be mad, but you were actively trying to cheat on me. Like, are you serious right now?" Because this is a conversation that needs to happen, like right away in my opinion. Like, yes, snooping is wrong to an extent, but what he is doing is way worse than anything you did. So hopefully things work out, and you're able to find some kind of solution to this situation, because your fiance is being super sketchy, and you do not deserve this in the slightest. My mom controls the majority of my finances, and despite my asking, she does not let me have any access to it and makes financial decisions for me on my behalf without asking me first, and I seriously don't know what to do. Now, to preface this, I want to say that I have 2 part-time jobs where I make about $700 a month, and I still live at home because I'm a full-time student. So as the title states, my mom controls my saving and spending accounts because my bank accounts are just under her name, while I have access to view the balances. When I get paid, she usually takes money out of my paycheck and puts it into my savings. I don't entirely have a problem with that, but she doesn't tell me when she takes money out of my spending account and puts it into my savings. In addition, I am locked out of my savings account. I can only view the balance. I can't deposit money into my savings, nor can I take any amount out. I always have to ask her for my own money back, and even then, she doesn't always give me that money. As spoiled as this sounds of me, my parents won't even let me pay my own phone bill, despite me having the income to do that because my phone is registered under my mom's name. I will admit I spend my money on some unnecessary things, but I never let my account balance go below $150 before the next payday. Again, I get paid like $300 per day if I'm lucky, and I've put off buying clothes and shoes just because I know at any point my mom could take my money away from me. My parents are constantly pushing me to be responsible with my finances, but I don't think I even have the opportunity to prove responsibility because of how much money is constantly taken out of my reach. I literally just turned 20 years old, and when I deposited $250 in birthday money through an ATM so that I could buy a new pair of shoes and some clothes, I had it taken away and put in my savings on that same day without being told. And that was just my breaking point with this situation. My friends have suggested I create my own bank account since I am an adult, and as much as I would like to do that, I have over $12,000 in savings that only my mom has control of, and I don't even know how I would convince her to give me that money to put in a new bank account. Along with that, my mom works at the same bank that my money is under, and the location she works at is a branch that I would have to visit to speak with a financial advisor. The financial advisors would end up being my mom's coworker and a family friend, and I don't know if personal conflicts or their working relationship with my mom would get in the way of my autonomy over my money, even though I know they can't do that to me legally. If I had even a sliver of control over my finances, I wish that I could just emphasize that I do have a solid plan with what I want to do with my money, and that I wouldn't just blow through all my money and savings because I want to move out at some point, even though I live in a nightmare city in terms of affording the cost of living. How should I go about this situation? Should I make my own bank account? And even if I did, what would I do afterwards? What should I do? I would absolutely already be making a bank account for myself. If I was 20 years old and my mom was restricting what money I could and couldn't spend, as well as not allowing me to access my savings, I would be freaking out. There's no way I would allow that for a second. So yes, you absolutely should go into another bank and make another account. And I say another bank. I personally would not go to the one your mom works at. That would be really weird, and yeah, I can see a lot of the roadblocks that would come up, as well as the anxiety that you could possibly feel in this regard. So literally just take your next paycheck and put it into a new bank account. You can probably also set up direct deposit on this new account, so your mom would literally never have any access to it ever again. Because even though you say you have like what, $12,000 in your savings, you technically don't have any money because your mom is not allowing you to access that money. Even just when when it comes to managing it yourself. You earned that, she did not. And it sounds like this is an account that you had when you were younger, and you are just now basically becoming an adult and trying to maintain your own situation. So hopefully you can get that figured out sooner than later, because that money is yours, and you have every right to have access to it. My entitled boss demands that me, as well as the rest of the company that is stretched out over the entire state that we live in, meet up with him in person the next day for an all-hands-on-deck meeting. And despite our protests and telling him that this is going to be a logistical nightmare, this guy refuses to take no for an answer, forcing all of us to travel to try and meet up with him. So we as a team decided to get petty, and as a result, we cost him thousands of dollars in the process of simply coming to his stupid meeting. And I've never been more satisfied to watch somebody quit so early into their new job. Here's what happened. So I'll keep the details vague as possible because I am still with this organization, but I will say that I work for a government department. We have offices and locations all over the state, but I'm based out of a city that's about 2 hours of a train ride from our head office. At the time, I was working in a team that had members working remotely all across the state. They were looking after policy, they were in processing, and they were a part of quality assurance. Our old manager had gone and gotten himself promoted for being genuinely brilliant at his role. So our new manager, who we'll call Steve, that's not his real name, was hired in from the glorious world of banking, and he was apparently here to whip us lazy public servants into shape. A few days after he began his role, he called us all to a teleconference to inform all of us that he wanted us at the head office at 8 o'clock a.m., stating that tomorrow morning there's going to be an all-day in-person team meeting. He wanted to see us in person and size us up, as well as understanding what we do, while also trying to see where we weren't keeping up in the private sector. As I mentioned, due to the nature of the work that we were doing, we were all across the state, so in-person entire team meetings were very rare, and if they occurred at all, they were booked weeks in advance. We were all adapted to video conferencing long before COVID even was a thing. Now, some of us tried to tell our new high-flying manager that almost none of us were in the same city as him, and to be there on such a short notice would mean travel expenses, meal allowances, as well as overtime. But this guy simply did not care, and told us in no uncertain terms to just be at the head office tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning, all before abruptly hanging up on us. Now, I should explain something first and foremost. I'm one of the handful of union delegates in our department, and I know it back to front, specifically the sections dealing with travel, allowances, and overtime. So I jumped into my favorite mode, which is malicious compliance. And if Steve really wanted us there, well fine, we could do that, but it's gonna cost him. So I quickly went about emailing my team, explaining what Steve had done by requiring us to go to the head office at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. And I also provided instructions in what to do. Because we would have to travel outside of our normal working hours, our workday clock started ticking the moment we left our homes and only stopped once we got home. Some of our team traveled overnight, and they were entitled to overtime to travel, a dinner allowance, and accommodations for the night, and the same for when they returned home. As someone traveling in the morning before 7 o'clock in the morning, I was entitled to a breakfast allowance, lunch allowance, and if I got home by 9 o'clock at night, I would also get a dinner allowance. So I left my house at 5 a.m. to catch the only train that would get me there in time. The train was running slightly behind, but I made it in time. So with my first 3 hours of my workday down, I've done literally no work. After a brief period of us introducing ourselves to Steve, he proceeds to spend the next 4 hours telling us about all the things he did at the bank, how he made so much money for them, where they would send him as a holiday bonus, and how we're all stuck in the past in the public service, while also claiming that the work that he had seen wasn't up to standards when it comes to the private sector. He had all the cockiness of a financial bro who had always failed upwards because others had picked up his slack. By 3 p.m., my entire team were into overtime pay territory, and Steve was just warming up with his non-charm offensive. Another 3 hours go by, with Steve verbally patting himself on the back, deeply in love with hearing his own voice, but all I'm hearing is ka-ching, ka-ching. We are making some serious cash. Steve decided that 5 o'clock p.m. was a good time to finish up. He stopped mid-sentence, looked at his watch, and unceremoniously said, "That's all for today, go home now," and then just walked out. After I and a few others gave a few awkward shrugs to each other, we all packed up and started to make our own separate ways home, after literally doing no work all day. I myself got to the train station pretty quickly, and I saw that a train was leaving soon, so that I would be able to get home by at least about 8 o'clock. Or I could do something a little bit trickier, and instead catch all the station's trains and get home closer to 9:30 p.m. And you know what? No matter how fast I could run, I just couldn't catch that earlier train. What a crazy circumstance that I was stuck in, if you know what I mean. So I guess I would just have to catch all the trains in each station and be clocked out for another hour and a half, on top of having my dinner paid for. What a shame. All kidding aside though, I submitted my claims the next day. 4.5 hours at double rate, my train tickets, my taxi fares to and from the train station, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner allowances, and for me alone, it was close to a $500 expense claim. The rest of my team also followed suit and ensured they claimed everything as well. Steve actually tried to fight us on approval for the claims, but quickly learned that unlike in the world of banking, most public servants are unionized, and we would make his life a living nightmare if he denied our guaranteed allowances. His all-day symposium blew a good $6,000 in his budget. Needless to say, while Steve was our manager, he never required us to attend an in-person meeting ever again. After that, video conferencing was just fine. Steve eventually only lasted about 6 months before leaving for new opportunities. And you know what he did? He just went back to his old job at the bank. So I guess overall, he was the one who simply couldn't keep up. I think I've had a few managers like Steve in the past. They go into a job thinking they're gonna whip this place into shape. They are clearly under the assumption that everybody else is lazy and he's gonna be the savior of this business, when in reality, there's a good likelihood that everyone is in fact doing their job, and in fact, he's going to be the one that's going to be the odd man out. And based on the way he acted and the fact that he wanted an in-person meeting the next day is more proof than you possibly need to show that this guy just did not know what he was doing. I mean, talk about going into a job, being this narcissistic, self-aggrandizing weirdo, as well as instantly making an enemy out of everybody that you're around. Like, that's not fair in the slightest for anybody that works at that company. And I also think it's absolutely hilarious that the original poster, as well as their team, decided, you know what, we're gonna milk this guy for all the money we can possibly get. And I honestly think this was well deserved. Like, it would be one thing if they planned this long in advance and they were like, okay, in like a month, we're gonna have an in-person meeting so I can meet up with everybody and we can have a good time and talk about the business. But no, this guy literally only had a meeting to try and stroke his own ego. So with all things considered, it probably really was a good thing that he left. And I think the original poster hit it on the head. This guy clearly was the one who simply could not keep up. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My friend is having a baby shower soon, and she invited me to come along, but I honestly am not sure if I should go or not, all because my friend has been very distant from me, as well as acting incredibly weird, and I seriously don't know what to do. So I met my friend Jane and her husband about 5 years ago through a mutual friend. Jane is not her real name. At that time, we grew close quickly and would get together often. We considered each other best friends and bonded over our love of activism, art, design, and similar lifestyles. At the beginning of the pandemic, our friendship started to fade. I was going through a breakup with my then boyfriend of 6 years, and she moved back to stay with her parents across the country. I tried to stay in contact. I was sending care packages. I took care of Jane's plants. I took deliveries for her while she was away. I was feeling alone and stressed out, but I understood with COVID she was going through a lot and couldn't give me the support that I needed. I leaned more on her other friends and my family. When Jane and her husband returned, we weren't as close, but we still would get together often. I could tell she found it hard to relate to my dating stories, and I found it hard to relate to her stories due to some rapidly changing lifestyle differences. Most recently, she and her husband have decided to have a baby. This was a little jarring to me, as we had often bonded in the past over being child-free, and I admit while I am happy for her, I do mourn for our closer friendship, as well as the idea of being child-free friends. I was positive around her still, and I listened to all her worries. I also brought her pregnancy affirmation cards, and generally offered her some good support. It hurt, but I understand that she feels closer to her friends, who are more nurturing, or who also want kids. When we hang out, she talks a lot about her life, and I ask a lot of questions, but she doesn't ask a lot about me, other than asking, well, how are you? I have a major surgery coming up, and she seems to have zero interest in it, which makes me feel like our friendship is very one-sided. Over Christmas of 2022, she reached out to me and said she wanted to give me a gift. Now, I had not been planning on it, but I went out and I got her a thoughtful gift as well. When I gave mine to her, she said that she forgot the gift for me. Fast forward, and for the following 4 to 6 times that we got together, she brought up her gift to me and how she has forgotten it, or she just didn't wrap it up, and she doesn't want to give it to me unwrapped. I never asked about it, and I completely understand that I'm not entitled to a gift, but I have have to admit that I'm a bit offended, especially since this was her idea to do an exchange, and I could have saved like, what, $75 in the process? It's now April, and I still haven't gotten my gift, and she still brings it up. Recently, her husband and her friend invited me to a baby shower in a few weeks, and as a result, I was sent Jane's baby gift registry. The baby shower is the weekend following my birthday, but I don't have any concrete plans, so I really could attend if I chose to. She did apologize about being a bit absent and not being an active friend, but she did not do it directly to me, but instead did it through our friend group. Now, at this point, I am conflicted about attending, since I feel that I am not in a great mental state about our friendship, but also I don't want to be mean or petty. I am confident I could be pleasant and positive for the party, despite feeling a bit bitter about the state of our friendship. I've been wondering if I should attend while also not even getting her a gift in the first place, or if I should just sit this one out. I do have to RSVP soon, and I'm honestly not sure what to do. This is a tricky one. It really does seem like your friend has been very distant from you and very forgetful of you being a good friend. Like, that's exactly what you were from the sounds of it. You were actively in her life, and you've made a lot of efforts to try and be involved. But based on the gift exchange at Christmas, that was a really good indicator, in my opinion, that she does not value your friendship in the slightest. And as a result, she probably really only sees you as a good acquaintance, if anything. So when it comes to answering your question, I mean, you could go to the baby shower, but I would not get anything expensive when it comes to a gift. I would get something simple and just very cheap. Nothing above $30 in my opinion. And you could use this as an excuse to say, hey, you know what? I am involved. I'm here, I'm showing up, I'm trying to make some kind of appearance in a friend's life. And maybe this could be the beginning of you trying to bring back your friendship with this woman who does mean a lot to you. On the opposite end of the spectrum though, I would completely understand if you sat this one out. For her to say, hey, let's do a gift exchange, and then not exchange a gift with you is, in my opinion, completely inappropriate. And it's super toxic for her to keep bringing it up and to be like, oh, sorry, I didn't get your gift again. Like, why are you reminding me of that over and over again? So hopefully with whatever you choose to do with this situation, your decision is based off of what you would prefer. Because from the sounds of it, it really does sound like your friend has been very dismissive of your feelings. And that, in my opinion, absolutely needs to be taken into account. My entitled managers refuse to give me a meal benefit plan as I'm out in my city doing my job. So as a result of maliciously complying, I push them to not only get their legal team involved, but also forcing them to cave in and giving me, as well as my coworkers, the meal benefit plan that we deserve. Here's what happened. So to start off, here's a bit of backstory from a few years ago. I was working in healthcare. I was an HTA nurse, which around here is a nurse which travels around the city area doing health assessments which don't require a call from 911. My job was essentially picking up the jobs which do not require immediate response and try to treat the patient either at home or, if not possible, give instruction as to where they can get treatment for whatever was the ailment at the time. It was a job to assist people so that they wouldn't come to the ER with small injuries or illnesses that could easily be fixed and taken care of at a normal regular healthcare center. Also, my other part of the job was to go around and treat patients who might have IV treatments regularly or other like-minded stuff like that. Now, here's where my biggest issue came in. I noticed that as we drove around large areas from one patient to another, we had to stop for lunch at some point, and we would have to pay for our lunches from our own pocket, regardless of what it costed us. Now, this is common practice for something like the paramedics, as they usually eat whenever they can, and usually they're at some gas station getting food, so it's typically somewhere where they currently are and they just have time to eat. Now, with that in mind, I usually read the contracts pretty carefully, which comes from my previous career as an engineer, where I had to make foolproof contracts and avoid stepping on traps. And our healthcare union had negotiated that if your work requires a certain amount of time traveling, you should be entitled to a tax-free meal benefit. Now, I wasn't completely sure about it, or if that particular statement would apply for the job I was doing, but I decided to ask stupid questions about it and eventually force my supervisor to contact the management just to get a statement on the issue at hand. From the management, it went to the legal department and they began to delve into it, and it lasted for weeks. And this is because they couldn't outright deny it, and they eventually came to a conclusion that it could not be applied to the job which I had. Now, I was a little annoyed at this, but I decided to not contest it any more than that. But that's when another statement, which the union had negotiated for us, came to my attention, and that stated that if we have an office or a station, as well as a social space where we can warm up meals in like a microwave or a coffee maker, then we are entitled to have lunch break for about 30 minutes a day at the regular office where we leave every morning. And just to kind of recap, I mentioned earlier that our area is rather large. So if I was working on northern parts, for example, it could take about 2 hours to drive there, spend 4 hours with the patients around that area, and then drive back to the station in an 8-hour shift. So I agreed with the bosses that I would drop the issue with the meal benefit, and I will then instead eat at the office. And they agreed to this as well. I even got this in writing in an email, stating that I could do this. So moving forward, not every day, but a few times a week, when I was assigned to some faraway area, I jumped into the car, I drove there, and did maybe one patient call. Then I had to hurry back so I can begin my lunch break, take my 30 minutes to eat, and then drive back to do another patient, and then drive all the way back. That's a lot of driving, and it's a big waste of time. Eventually, after doing this for a while, I was confronted about this, and I just simply explained that because I can't afford to eat lunch every day, I just have to eat my own cooking at the office. And as we don't have a meal benefit, I'm practically forced to drive back and forth so that I can have my law-abiding lunch break. They were absolutely dumbfounded at first, but they could not squirm out of it in the slightest. Now, the common practice for who knows how long basically was that the paramedics and anybody else just kind of went along with it and paid for their own meals, as they literally didn't know any better. They had always had the possibility to go back to the station to eat, and I'm quite sure that we were all entitled for that meal benefit since it is prescribed by law, plus the union agreements in a way, basically stating that if you can't eat in a regular way at the office, you should and are entitled to a meal benefit instead. But up until me, literally no one else contested this in the slightest. Now, since they were so dumbfounded, they actually asked me to not do that in the future, but I responded to that by blatantly asking them if they're going to give me a meal benefit of any kind, because if they don't do it, I'm entitled to come back to the station and eat for my 30 minutes. Now, the discussion went on a little bit longer on this subject, but eventually they caved in. They arranged the meal benefit for every nurse and paramedic on the department, as they couldn't find a way out otherwise, and they couldn't have us driving back and forth and not performing our job in the slightest. So thankfully, in the end, I don't have to do all that useless driving, and now I get a meal plan simply because I decided to maliciously comply. Yeah, this story alone is why unions exist, because otherwise people get taken advantage of. There's a time and a place where unions are very useful, and this is literally one of them. The original poster probably cost them a lot of money just to teach them a lesson and explain to them, hey, if you want me to eat at the office, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. So I really think it was cool to see this original poster stand up for themselves, because having to drive back and forth like that is seriously not worth the cost. And if they had simply just given them the meal benefit plan like they asked in the beginning, they literally could have avoided all of this trouble in the first place. My entitled cousin claims that she spent some quality time with my boyfriend who passed away last year, and I'm not sure if she said this just to be mean or to try and hurt me, or if this really is the truth. And at this point, I don't know what to do. So almost a year ago, I lost the man that I consider the love of my life. He passed away in an accident unexpectedly. It was tragic, and I went into depression. He was the man I wanted to call my husband and have a family with. There were so many things we wanted to experience together. I just couldn't deal with it, and the pain was very strong. Thankfully, I had a few people who were there for me. I also went to therapy, and it really helped me. It still hurts a lot, but I'm doing my best to get through it. Now, here's the issue. I have this cousin who I see from time to time, but I don't really get along with. She only contacts me when she needs help with something. She used to have a lot of issues and trouble that she continues to struggle with to this day. So I used to feel a bit bad about her, and I would just try to help her out a little bit. 2 days ago, she called me because she wanted to know if I could take care of her kids, and this was just going to be for a few hours. She is a single mother of 2. I told her that I couldn't do it because I had to study for an exam, and right about then, she started to get mad. She went on a rant and told me that I was a jerk, saying that I was lying and things like that. I told her I was done with her and her insults, and right as I was about to hang up, that's when she told me something that absolutely ruined me. She said that she spent some quality time with my former boyfriend for 3 months, and that was all the way up until the day that he passed away. Now, when she said that, I just couldn't believe it. I was in disbelief. I was completely shocked, but I didn't know if it was true or not. I told her to shut up and that it was all lies. I then said that she needs to take her medication, and then I just hung up on her. I started to cry. I was in so much shock. I wasn't ready for that. I know she has some bipolar issues, but I also know for sure that she has spent some quality time with plenty of people who've been married and taken men as well away from their wives in the past. I am so confused. I have such a hard time believing that my boyfriend would have been able to do that to me. He didn't even like her, and she didn't like him either. I don't think she was his type, and he told me she was bringing up too much drama. If it is true, I never saw or noticed anything. I can't believe it, but it put some doubts in my mind. I'm feeling lost and confused now. Is she lying? Did she invent this because she wanted to be mean or just to hurt me? What should I do? There are two possibilities here, and both of them really do not reflect well on your cousin. For starters, there's a good chance that she said this just to be mean. She wanted to think of the worst thing that she could think of just to try and hurt you. And she knows that you're mourning the loss of your boyfriend, and she knows that if she said that she had spent some quality time with him, that would absolutely destroy you. And by the way, this is over you not babysitting her kid for a few hours. I'm starting to figure out why she's single, by the way. Hopefully you are too. The other possibility that I honestly don't believe is that maybe she did spend some quality time with your boyfriend, but still that only reflects badly on her. And based off of what you're describing, I just don't believe that that might be the case. Your boyfriend clearly did not like her, and it sounds like he recognized her as just a drama magnet. There's also no way of corroborating that kind of claim, and in my opinion, there's no point in trying to dig deeper into that. So instead of asking if this lady's lying or not, I think you need to ask yourself, why am I still in contact with her? She is clearly trying to manipulate you and use you so you can be some kind of free babysitter for her, and even if she did have a thing with your boyfriend, she only brought it up to try and hurt your feelings. So I would honestly start the process of removing this lady from my life for good, and that's regardless of what the truth is. Honestly, I am so sorry that you lost your boyfriend, but you're going to be so much better away from this crazy cousin. She does not have your best interest in mind, and in my opinion, it really seems like she is just trying to hurt you. My entitled parents kicked me out of their house at the age of 10 years old, forcing my grandparents to take me in and raise me as their own child. And now, later in life, after I received an inheritance from my grandparents, my parents are coming back into my life and demanding that I hand over everything that I inherited. And I am honestly amazed by how clueless and absolutely obnoxious they truly are. Here's what happened. So to start things off, I was born when my mother and father were only 17 years old. This forced both of my parents to drop out of high school and each have to get their GED just so they could find work right away. My father especially was not happy about this because he had dreams of playing football in college, and instead he had to work at a gas station. He said to my face many times that I ruined his dream. My mother hardly raised me at all, as she had to work as well. They had some cranky old lady next door who would watch me most of the time. She wasn't so bad. I mean, she gave me more attention than my parents did. My father eventually managed to land a better job as a manager due to his experience of running a gas station. It was right after that my mom got pregnant with my sister. I was 6 years old when she was born, and I wasn't exactly shown much love before that. But once my sister came along, it was made pretty obvious to even my 6-year-old self that I was completely unwanted. The only ones who seemed to care about me were my paternal grandparents and somewhat my babysitter, and they were more like a parental figure to me because they treated me the way a little kid needed to be loved. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and as my sister got older, it went from me sharing a bedroom with her to me being kicked out of the room entirely. I slept on the couch for 2 years, and I barely had anything to my name other than clothes, school supplies, and an old Game Boy. When I was 10 years old, my parents decided that they were going to move away, but this move did not include me. And you know what? I actually ended up being fine with this, as my grandparents had agreed to take me in. And when that happened, my life instantly became better, and there were a couple of other kids my age in the neighborhood that I got to hang out with. We rode bikes together, we played video games together, we would build forts, and we got dirty playing in the creek. You know, stuff that a normal kid would enjoy. I was finally happy. As time went on, I grew up, and I eventually moved out. But I later moved back in to help my grandparents' house, as they were getting old and living off of their retirement savings. So some rent money from me went a long way in paying for the bills. My grandfather was the kind of person who wanted to build a shelter during the Cold War, but he never got around to it. He wanted to volunteer for military service in the 60s, but was turned down due to a medical condition and the fact that his eyesight was not great, so he focused on saving whatever he thought he needed. He told me many times it was better to have something and not need need it than to need it and not have it. Our area suffered from numerous power outages in the winter due to heavy winds and storms, so having gasoline and propane for heaters and generators was a must. All of these saving habits became my own as time went on, because it was better to need this stuff rarely than to not have it at all. Fast forward, and about 5 years back, my grandma passed away suddenly, and my grandfather was heartbroken, with him also going about a year and a half later. Pretty much everything they owned was willed to me. Their savings, their house, their vehicles, their stuff, everything. The house was long paid off, and my grandfather knew how to keep up with maintenance. In fact, after my grandmother passed away, he kind of doubled down on renovating the place. He had the roof redone, the house was repainted by us inside and out, and we fixed a lot of things. My grandfather's neighbor even came by to help redo the plumbing. Ironically enough, the HOA was rather happy with these changes, because the house itself didn't look run down anymore. I mean, it all happened so suddenly. One morning I was just fixing breakfast and my grandfather never came downstairs. You couldn't keep this man from bacon even if you tried. So I went to check on him and he wasn't moving. I called the paramedics and they told me that he passed away in his sleep. And this is right about when my parents came into the picture again. My parents made my grandfather's funeral an absolute nightmare. In fact, they didn't even bother to show up for my grandmother's funeral. They claimed that they were too busy. At my grandfather's funeral, they didn't seem to grieve at all. My sister also showed up wearing a brightly colored designer dress. I noticed my parents repeatedly whispering to each other and glaring at me whenever I looked at them. I come to find out at the will reading that my parents knew that they'd been disinherited a long time ago, all because of the way they treated me. And they thought it was extremely unfair that I got everything. In fact, they thought it was so unfair that they threatened to sue me to contest the will. I got repeated calls and messages from my father, as well as my mother and my sister, all of which telling me I needed to do the right thing and give my father what was supposed to be his. And when they did that, I just told them to get lost. Eventually, my parents ended up taking me to court to challenge the will, but the judge ruled in my favor after seeing the will and hearing us both out. So it wasn't a long, drawn-out legal battle, thankfully. The judge even looked at my parents with absolute disgust after seeing the will and hearing about the mistreatment of me in my childhood. He called my father a terrible parent and stating that my grandparents were right to disown him. My father just hung his head in silence, but he made sure to stop me outside the courtroom and tell me that I was the biggest mistake in his life. And if he could go back in time, he would make sure I never existed, while also saying that he should have been a football star. And instead, he has to wear a name tag from 9 to 5. I told him that mistake or not, my grandmother and grandfather could see what kind of nasty person he was. I also did not ask to be born, and the only real love I ever got was from my grandparents. So I just told him straight up that he was no father of mine. I got a few more phone calls, as well as some letters from my parents, all demanding money among other things. But over time, they just stopped because I completely stonewalled them. I never responded to emails or letters, and I stayed silent during the phone calls. A few times, I just left the phone sitting on the counter with them ranting and raving until they realized I wasn't listening. Aside from not getting the house or money, my parents seemed particularly bothered that they couldn't get a rise out of me. But I was prepared to go all out against them, and they knew it. So in the end, they just left me alone. From what I know, looking back at Facebook for the past decade, my sister tried to get into modeling, got married, had 2 kids, got divorced, and is currently unhappily working a job she feels is beneath her. My mother currently works retail and is also very vocal about her disdain of it. Like my father, she peaked in high school. She was a cheerleader back then and even had her old uniform framed on the wall. My father was pretty much at the same job for 25 years. As for me, I'm in my late 30s now, and I live pretty much debt-free in a nice neighborhood. Not many people are in the financial situation that I am at my age. I'm single, I have a paid-off house, I've got 2 vehicles, and a decent amount in the bank. So with all things considered, I'm just glad to be away from my awful parents. What an awful upbringing you had to deal with, but also what awesome people your grandparents were. They took you in right away, and they allowed you to have some kind of childhood. I mean, what kind of parent would just kick their kid out at 10 years old? That is seriously insane to me. And if I was the grandparents in this situation, I would absolutely do the exact same thing and write the original poster's father out of the will. There's no way they're gonna get anything from me if this is the way that they treat their son. And it's so delusional that this guy's like, oh, I should have been a football star. No, you should have been a better father. Because in the end, these people got exactly what they deserve. Because the original poster honestly deserved a better childhood. And these parents seriously should be ashamed ashamed of themselves. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. I think that my boyfriend doesn't find me attractive anymore ever since he got his dream body, and I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend was a scrawny teenager when we first started dating, and girls really didn't go for him either. He got sick of being skinny and he wanted to get big. So I motivated him into being consistent with the workouts and the diet changes that he went through. I was there for him and supported him emotionally when he was making cuts and making progress. And you know what? It paid off. He got really fit. Eventually, girls started throwing themselves at him. He curved all of them at first, although he did admit to flirting with some girl, which I stupidly allowed because I didn't want to come off as the crazy, jealous girlfriend. But then came our senior year. I needed time to focus more on myself and my education. I needed to get really busy. We had been on breaks before, so I wasn't that worried in asking for one. I had stayed loyal when he used to ask for breaks when life got super busy for him, so I figured that he would obviously do the same for me. But it all came crashing down on me. We were on a call and I broke everything down to him. He just stayed silent, like he'd been waiting for this to happen. I had mentioned that we might need to do this before, and he was not fazed. He said, "Can I talk to other girls while you're away?" And I immediately replied back by saying, "Of course." Again, I just wanted to seem like the perfect laid-back girlfriend that was secure in herself and her man. And I was. I never for a second doubted that I was anything less than his dream girl. That is, until his conversations with me afterwards, which consisted of backhanded compliments, saying stuff like, "You have no idea how many ladies I've listened to." Stuff like that. But I just laughed, and I just said that there was no way that he would have talked to other women. I wasn't taking him seriously. He then proceeded to text some girls and get them to send some scandalous photos to him, only to then show them to me right then and there. And after he did that, I just started to cry. I didn't cry because of his borderline cheating, but mostly because of how different the girls compared to me. They were all skinny with size 0 waists and A cups, whereas I've got a bigger chest and thicker thighs. I'm a fuller person. He then said that I had asked for it by provoking him, and he said this later on that night when we called each other, and in the end he never actually apologized for it. But his way of comforting me was by saying that I'd never be replaced. It did comfort me to some extent, but it hasn't been the same since. He's admitted to talking to one specific girl. He refused to tell me her real name, but showed me a picture of hers, and lo and behold, she was skinny with a conventionally attractive face. But no, it was okay, because this chick knows that he's taken, right? He decided to rub salt in the wound even further by mentioning how I couldn't fathom how pretty her body was, and how he wouldn't share. I'm realizing just how sick it was right now, even though according to him, he stopped what they had soon after. He doesn't really respond to me properly anymore. He uses very short and aggressive replies, and then turns it around and blames me when I mention how we never talk much these days. I know this is supposed to be a break, but it's a break on my end. So why is he the one acting unavailable all of a sudden? He was never like this when he was skinny. We used to go on breaks when life got hectic, but we would always technically be together. We would be loyal to one another. He says he loves me, but that's about it. He never shows it to me anymore and doesn't care when I send him photos anymore in the slightest. He used to go crazy for them, but now it's almost like it's nothing. The one thing I took pride in for us was our ability to communicate. Should I swallow my pride and ask him what's up? Even if it might break my heart, we've been together for 3 years now, and I don't want to make it all just go down the drain. What should I do? Honestly, I am very surprised that you're even with this guy anymore. He clearly does not value you in the first place, and he's obviously got his eyes set on other women in the area. And I just don't think this is a good relationship for you in the slightest. You are letting so many things slide. He showed you inappropriate photos of other women, and he basically has another woman on check to basically step in and take your place at any point. And that's not fair for you in the slightest. Like seriously, he is cheating on you. There's nothing borderline about this. And he's also blaming anything negative in this relationship on you. Like in a way, he kind of sounds like a narcissist. So seriously, in my opinion, you can do so much better than this guy. You are both only 18 years old, and you'll find somebody who really does care about you and you only, because the way he's acting is completely out of line and you could do so much better. My sister says I can't be at her wedding if I bring my boyfriend, who I have known for several years at this point, and I'm so upset I seriously don't know what to do. So I met my boyfriend in college 7 years ago, and we started dating 5 years ago. He is super close and loving with my family. He was there for my niece niece's births, baptisms, Christmases, vacations, you name it. We are extremely committed to each other for the long run, but don't want to get married until we are financially stable and both of our careers are where we want to be. My sister has been with her fiance for 2 years and engaged for 6 months. My sister's the type of girl who has dreamed of getting married since she was a little girl. It did not matter who proposed, she just wanted to be married. I have never cared if I ever got married or not. As long as I have a good career and a good relationship, I'm fine. In the beginning of her relationship, she tricked me into going on a double date with her fiance, as well as her brother. She had said it was dinner with her and a friend, but it was most definitely not. The brother kept making passes at me the entire time, and I told him I had a boyfriend, and the whole situation made me uncomfortable. At their engagement party, my boyfriend noticed that the brother wouldn't stop staring at me, and we tried our best to avoid him altogether. Every time I have seen this guy, he has been super weird towards me. My sister wanted me, my fraternal twin, and 2 brothers in her wedding. The wedding is supposed to be next month in the beginning of May. My sister just told me that I'm going to be walking down the aisle with her fiance's brother. I told her that he makes me unbelievably uncomfortable, and I thought I would be walking with my own brother. But apparently this is something her fiance is insisting, and she just wants to make him happy. It seems like a pretty weird thing to insist, and I know that it's just some kind of scheme between the 2 brothers. My other siblings also thought it was weird and voiced their objections to our sister. She got upset and said this is her wedding, and she'll do whatever she wants. I told my boyfriend this, and he was upset for me. He's confident enough in himself that he knows this guy would never be competition, but he knows how uncomfortable I am with this situation. The other day, we had family dinner at my mom's house, and I took this as an opportunity to bring up the aisle situation with my mother around. My sister got extremely upset and started crying, saying I was trying to ruin her marriage. I was so confused, as was everyone else, and I tried to explain that he makes me and my boyfriend extremely uncomfortable. She then said that I can't bring my boyfriend to her wedding anymore, and if I do, then I'm no longer gonna be her bridesmaid. She gave no reason whatsoever as to why I can't bring him along, and my siblings were just as upset, considering they like my boyfriend a lot better than my sister's fiance. I thought I would give her a few days to calm down and rethink all of this, but she has not changed her mind. My 19-year-old brother's girlfriend is still invited to the wedding, but my boyfriend is not allowed to be there. My boyfriend is an incredible guy and has been nothing but kind and generous to my sister. His feelings are hurt, but he still wants me to go to the wedding. I think my sister is being an unreasonable jerk, and I will be pretty upset at the wedding if my life partner is not there with me. Being her bridesmaid is something I can live without. So should I bring my boyfriend or go without him? Or should I demand that my boyfriend be allowed to come to her wedding and that she's being super unfair? Now, I love my sister, but I don't understand why she's forcing some silly request by her creepy brother-in-law. And worst of all, my family is being absolutely useless in helping me figure this out. What should I do? First off, I think you've already figured this out, but your sister's being unreasonable. I honestly don't know why she's trying to pair you up with this guy who clearly makes you uncomfortable. It honestly does seem like a setup, and that's just super creepy. Like, you even explain to this guy, hey, I have a boyfriend, but he still keeps trying to make passes at you and stare at you. Like, that's just weird in my opinion. You're never gonna hook up with him, and he needs to stop. So that alone, in my opinion, is more than enough reason to say, hey, you know what? I think I'm gonna back out. This guy is creepy, I don't want to be around him, and I will happily sit in the audience and watch you get married. And you know what? She's only saying that your boyfriend can't come along because you exposed her to your mom as well as the rest of your siblings. And although they're being very nonchalant about this, you can bet that they're probably on your side. They like your boyfriend, they like your future partner, and they also don't understand why he's not allowed to come to the wedding. Like, that's just weird. So I think with whatever goes on or whatever you decide to do, I think you just need to remember how your sister's acting right now, because her behavior is incredibly toxic, and you do not deserve this in the slightest. A friend of a friend made it very clear that he wants to pursue my girlfriend, and all the while, my girlfriend knew about this guy's intentions but kept that information from me. And now, as a result, I'm incredibly offended, and I seriously wish she had just told me in the first place before I committed to spend any kind of time with this guy or her friends. Here's what happened. So for a bit of backstory, my girlfriend attended a bachelorette party a month ago. One of the bridesmaids was dropped off by her husband and a friend of the husband. In the 5 minutes that friend saw my girlfriend, he supposedly fell in love with her at first sight. sight and made it clear to his friends and the bride that he was interested, despite the bride telling him that my girlfriend was in a happy relationship. The bride shares this in confidence with my girlfriend, asking her to keep it a secret as it is just silly gossip. Fast forward a month and it's Friday and I'm at a dinner of the wedding rehearsal. My girlfriend and I sit at a small table and this friend of the husband intentionally sits across from me, all while his friends sit at an entirely different table. We make conversation and have a really good time, and upon leaving, he mentions that we should all hang out together at the wedding as well. Saturday comes around and at the wedding, that friend is pre-seated at an entirely different table, so we don't interact much. As they leave, however, the bridesmaid, her husband, and the friend of the husband all approach us and enthusiastically mention that we should all hang out outside of the wedding more, which kind of strikes me as odd, considering we didn't really engage much, but in the end, I agree nonetheless. At night, I bring this up to my girlfriend, and I can't quite wrap my head around it, but that's right about when she lets out the secret. We've been discussing this ever since, and I feel like I deserve to know when he started approaching us on Friday, whereas my girlfriend insists that she didn't tell me because she felt our relationship was strong and there was nothing to be worried about, and also she didn't want to make me angry or make things awkward. My girlfriend states that if he made any obvious moves, like asking for her number or anything like that, then she would have shut him down and let him know right then and there. I personally would have never wanted to be in the dark about this. It just makes me feel like a complete idiot while I invite this guy to hang out with us and wingman him into my relationship. As close partners, I feel like I should be included in details like this. I don't care if some random person on the street hits on my girlfriend, but if it's someone who's potentially close or a coworker or something like that, then that's an entirely different story. Also, I would have wanted my girlfriend to have relayed a message to the bride or a bridesmaid that she wasn't interested at all after the events on Friday. Is this something reasonable to expect, or am I just being controlling? What should I do? In my opinion, your girlfriend absolutely should have told you about that. This weirdo is repeatedly and intentionally inserting himself in situations where he can further his goal of getting closer to your girlfriend. This situation, in my opinion, is a snake in the grass trying to break up your relationship. And I mean, honestly, even if your girlfriend is used to a lot of male attention or anything like that, the day that he sat across from you to try and befriend you, she should have let you know what was going on and why he was acting the way he was. So no, in my opinion, you are not being unreasonable. And I think the fact that you're in a relationship and your girlfriend decided to keep this information from you is, in my opinion, pretty sketchy. And it's something that the both of you really do need to talk about. An entitled Karen and her kids make all kinds of noise at 2 in the morning while everybody's trying to get some sleep on the ferry ride back to our destination. And after I tell those kids to please be quiet, this entitled Karen gets offended, demanding that I never talk to her kids like that ever again. And I have seriously never been more annoyed by a person and their kids in my life. Here's what happened. So I've just come back from a coach trip from the UK to Disneyland Paris. It was a wonderful trip, apart from one family who decided they could do whatever they wanted with no consequence. To set the scene, me and my 2 friends have just arrived at the bus stop and are waiting for the coach. In front of us is a family of 4 adults and 3 children. There's a young girl around the age of 10, a boy who is also about 10 years old, and a teenage boy. All 3 are sat on the floor and are attempting to play a card game. However, the girl is screaming at the top of her lungs, telling the other kids how to play the game. The adults tried to intervene once, got sworn at by the children, and then gave up. Me and my friends exchanged glances before resorting to sending each other memes silently, just so we could voice our discontent. Luckily, we were seated in the front of the coach, and the family was in the back. We could still hear the girl yelling all the way, but we let it slide because, hey, we're going to Disneyland, and they're probably just excited. We went on to have a wonderful couple of days in Disneyland, completely forgetting that this family even existed. That is, until it was time to come home. You see, dear reader, we are broke, so we had to book a coach that left Disney at 8 o'clock at night and arrived back in London at 4:30 a.m. So with that in mind, it's a given that you would want to sleep on the coach. Well, as we waited for our coach to come and collect us, there we were once again, reminded of that child's ear-piercing scream as well as her shrieks. And this came about as she ran around the car park in front of the cars while the adults once again did absolutely nothing. My friends and I exchanged worried glances, but this was honestly only the beginning. Once on the coach, people started pulling out neck pillows and blankets, ready in some kind of attempt to try and sleep. But not that family. They talked loudly about their trip and complained that the driver hadn't put on the radio so that we could listen. People were already grumbling, but the family paid them no mind. Once we reached for a certain point, it got worse. The driver asked for a volunteer to collect everybody's passports and to bring them to the front. One of the adults and the girl's mother volunteered and had to sit at the front with the driver, all while sorting out the passports. Well, this entitled child thought this was an invitation to run up and down the aisle between her parents, before loudly demanding that her mother sing happy birthday in Welsh. This was at midnight, by the way, and it was honestly just about as annoying as you possibly could imagine, but it only got worse. After border control had checked out our passports, the mother decided to hand some of them to her children, but that wasn't good enough for the little girl, who kept screaming at her mom to give her more. Apparently, no was not a word she could understand, and she simply kept screaming. Even when people started stating that they were not comfortable with these stupid brats handling their passports, these bratty entitled children still got to hand them out. And then we finally boarded the ferry at 1:30 in the morning, and we were finally ready for a quiet crossing. But you know what? We were wrong again. Initially, my friends and I sat in an area with a kids' play area, but we quickly realized and relocated to a quieter area of the ship so we could try and grab some kind of sleep. People around us were sprawled out on benches with blankets over their heads, and mothers had sleeping children in their laps. We found a quiet corner and we started to doze off, and that's when we heard it. That same piercing shrieking, all from that one stupid girl. They were running up and down the length of the ship, shouting and screeching as they went. People were even being startled awake every single time they went by. Other children were beginning to cry because they were so tired. The teenage boy was literally winding up the younger two, making them shout even more. The adults of the group were absolutely nowhere to be seen. Eventually, I snapped. After a particularly piercing shriek, I yelled out, "Quiet, please. It is 2 o'clock in the morning and people are trying to sleep." Several other murmurs of agreement surrounded me. They went silent, looked at me, and then ran off. Now, I knew what was coming. We all knew, because in marched one of the adults. Not the mother, just another one of the adults. She looked at me and said, "What did you say to the kids?" And she said this quite loudly at that. I explained that I told them to be quiet and that there are people trying to sleep. I then gestured to the people groggily emerging from their blankets to see what the commotion was. This entitled Karen then looks at me and says, "If you've got a problem, speak to an adult. Don't shout at the kids." So I rebuttal by saying, "Well, where are you?" She then points and says, "Down there." They were literally at the opposite end of the ship. So I said, "Why were you not with them?" And that's when this stupid lady said something really dumb. She said, "They're hyper. Kids are gonna be hyper." But I doubled down and said that it's 2 o'clock in the morning and people are trying to sleep. She went on to say again that I should have come and talked to them, but I explained, how am I supposed to know who you were and where you would be? I don't even know who these kids are. She eventually leaves after saying, "Whatever, just don't shout at kids." And then they left. Was it the end? Oh no. They continued their shrieking and running. When we attempted to find the adults as they had requested, they had moved and were nowhere to be found again. The girl also tried to stare at me a couple of times. I think she was trying to intimidate me, which honestly was laughable. Eventually, the ferry trip came to an end, and I waited until the last possible second to get back on the coach so that they wouldn't have to walk past me. I was thanked several times by fellow ferry passengers in both French and English for my attempts to shut up those stupid entitled kids. Those are awful parents. Like, what kind of parent would just let their kid run up and down a ship literally at 2 in the morning? Like, what are you doing? You need to put them to bed and have them sleep even just in some kind of way. Like, everyone's tired from going to Disneyland and no one wants to deal with your stupid kid. And maybe if those entitled parents were better parents in the first place, those entitled kids wouldn't be running around at 2 in the morning. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled boss demands that I stop doing a certain aspect of my job, and as a result of me not doing this very specific thing, everything starts to go wrong in the office altogether. Here's what happened. So back in my college days in the early 90s, I got a job at my college's Alumni Communications Center. In reality, it's just a call center where college students work to ask the low-giving alumni for money. So I, as a sophomore, worked in data entry. A quick sidebar, we also had a couple of call coaches who were seniors who would monitor the calls and give them feedback on how to do a better job at asking alumni for money. Typically, donations in the $100 to $250 range was pretty much what we asked for. When callers made a call, they recorded the outcome of the call on a sheet of paper. I would then collect these sheets and then go to the sole computer in the caller center and record all the data. Most of the results I entered would be no answer or left a message on a voice machine. Sometimes we got a donation, so I would enter the caller outcome into the computer. Then the alumni department would generate a donation envelope that would then be mailed out so that the check could come back to us in a timely manner. Now, about 10% of the donations would be by credit card, and at the end of the night, after the callers left, I would spend about 30 minutes processing the credit cards through the dial-up credit card machine. I did this without issue for 2 months, from September all the way to October, but it's right about then when Karen, the new boss lady over the call center, comes into the scene. She finally notices the 30 extra minutes on my timesheet each day and asks me about it sometime in late October. I tell her that I process the credit cards that everyone leaves for the night. I state that that's how I was trained by the previous data entry person, and that is typically what I've been doing since I started. This upsets this entitled Karen, who says that I am far too young to be handling credit card information. She then makes it clear that I am to stick to my job of only entering the caller's data, period, end of story. She wanted me to be a data entry clerk only. She simply did not want me to handle any money, as the money is only to be handled by the grown-ups. And to be perfectly clear, these were credit card numbers handwritten on a sheet of paper. Absolutely no cash money was involved on my end. And so with this condescending Karen basically grilling me, I stopped processing the credit card donations. I set them in a pile at the end of the night right by the credit card machine. And with each passing night, the pile grows bigger and bigger. By the end of November, this pile was maybe 250 pages thick. It also wasn't my job to ask who it is that was processing these credit card sheets. Since the month ended and no credit cards were processed, Karen absolutely failed to hit her fundraising goals. She starts to berate the call coaches and the callers for not doing a good enough job. This entitled Karen starts spending more time in the call center, watching everything and everyone like a hawk, and I just continue to do exactly what I was told to do. One day, just to try and get us motivated, she would offer a prize of some sort, like a college hat, and then the next day, we would get a long lecture about how everyone else shouldn't be lazy. Over the course of December, I keep adding to the pile of unprocessed credit cards, and by this point, it's about 500 pages thick. Compared to the massive piles of sheets of no answers and left a message, it isn't very noticeable. Eventually and naturally, someone in the alumni department has noticed that the donations coming in are down by about 25% over November and December. This results in me coming back from Christmas break, where I get met by a new boss over the call center. He asks if my job includes processing credit cards, and I told him that the entitled Karen before him told me not to do it, but I was trained to process them. In fact, I'm the only one in this center that has ever been trained to process them. So he says, okay, that's fine. Go ahead and keep processing them. My new boss asks if there's any unprocessed credit card sheets, and I say, oh yeah, there definitely are. He then asks me if I could get this done over the next couple of weeks. So I tell them, absolutely, I can do this no problem. I then spent several hours over a couple of Saturdays processing all the credit cards. And as a result, my new boss had the absolute best January ever in the history of the call center. And because this guy was shining and did such a good job, at the end of the day, I ended up getting a raise from him, which is probably the nicest thing he could have done, especially when you consider how awful my former boss was. Wow, the way your former boss was acting was really weird. I mean, you're a college student. You absolutely can handle credit card information. I mean, there are teenagers who handle that information no problem. So why would you not be able to properly handle that? I mean, you've been doing that well before that Karen entered the picture. So why wouldn't you be able to do it now? She literally just made problems for herself. And you know what? If I was in your shoes, I would have left the same stack for that lady to figure out, because she clearly didn't know what she was doing, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down on her. My boyfriend asked me if his female friend could move in with us, and I'm really hesitant about this because of her past, as well as her problems with her addictions, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for 1 year. We live together in a house, and we have both had our share of long-term relationships, and we are pretty serious about each other and make plans for our future together. My boyfriend has a female friend of 20 years that I'm gonna call Jane. That's not her real name. To give some background, they dated for a couple of years in high school and in college, but things fell apart. But even despite that, they did stay close friends throughout the years. I knew this when we started dating, and I didn't have a problem with it. And that's because I knew that they were just friends. She lives in his hometown and we live in a different state, so it really wasn't an issue. But in the last few months, we have started to have issues surrounding their relationship. Jane is in a rough place in life. She has an ongoing addiction and a lot of problems in her life. She doesn't have many friends, and a few months ago, she quit her job and was worried about having a place to live. My boyfriend offered to let her live in his camper van, stating that he could drive it to her no problem. But I told him that I don't think that was a good idea, especially considering her addiction problems and how that may result in unfavorable consequences. He ended up agreeing after he offered it to her, but didn't communicate that to her, and instead waited for her to turn it down, which he thought that she would. She eventually ended up moving in with her dad, and when that happened, things were starting to really go poorly there. And since then, she has had several emotional breakdowns, calling my boyfriend, saying all these awful things. I felt really bad for her, but at the same time, she wasn't seeking help for her addiction or her problems, and she did not have a job. She was really stressed out about being able to pay her bills, so my boyfriend ended up giving her some money, which did total to a few $100s. I told him that I don't think that's a good idea, since he could be enabling her rather than helping her, and eventually he ended up agreeing. A few weeks later, he visited his hometown and they hung out. She has been doing odd jobs, but she is still struggling. He offered to give her money again after she said she was stressed out about bills, but she turned it down. I was so upset that he didn't keep his boundary, as well as his original decision. But whatever, I can't decide what he chooses to do with his money. Last night, she called him again crying, telling my boyfriend that the people she lives with are treating her badly. From what I understand, her family is awful. And today, my boyfriend asked if I would be okay with her living with us. And when he said that, I got really upset. From my perspective, it seems like they have a very codependent relationship. My boyfriend is the type of person that wants to help people, but at the same time, I don't think it's healthy that he's her only friend and that he's willing to offer to her a place to live in our house, knowing that we see things very differently. From our conversations, it seems that my boyfriend feels some sort of responsibility to help her or to save her. In fact, just the other day, he said that he doesn't think she's going to change, and then today, he wants to let her move in. I think it is his choice, and I really can't and shouldn't try to control what he does. I even told him that I could move out so she could move in, but I honestly don't see us all living together as a possibility. I also told him that we would definitely need to set boundaries, like her getting a job as well as professional help. I don't currently have the emotional capacity to do all of that right now. I know for a fact it would affect my mental health, but my boyfriend says that I don't really know her, and that I'm making assumptions about their relationship because I just don't know her. I've never met her or talked to her. And while I understand that is probably influencing my perspective, but at the same time, I think that I can see things that he can't because he's too close to it. In past conversations about her, he's become really defensive, especially when I mention the idea of him enabling her. I'm fine with him talking to her and supporting her as a friend, but I feel like this request has really crossed the line. I want to respect his choices and their relationship, but I feel that this will probably be an ongoing issue. I wonder if I'm overreacting or something like this. Honestly, overall, I'm really unsure of what to do or how to handle it. I personally think that this friend moving in with you and your boyfriend would be a massive mistake. Like, this person doesn't need a place to live. They need like rehab or some kind of professional help. And moving her problems from one state over to where you live is not going to solve anything, because really it's just going to give you a front row seat to her life falling apart. And sure, you have compassion for this lady's situation, but you know what? You can't possibly bear the brunt of that and be expected to carry somebody along who you've never met and basically don't know in the slightest. I personally find it very unfair that your boyfriend is pushing this on you, and I think he really does need to come to his senses. There's literally only so much you can do, and hopefully when you talk to him about this, he can try and see where you're coming from. My group project members absolutely do nothing all semester long, and as a result of me talking to the professor and talking her through exactly what's going on, all of my lazy team members got F's on that assignment, and I was able to get out with an A. Here's what happened. So a few years ago when I was doing my undergrad, I was in a level 300 marketing class. In the beginning of the class, we were assigned groups that we were supposed to work with throughout the semester. We were to put together a marketing proposal for a local professional sports team, and we would pitch it to them as part of our final grade. Every topic we were learning in class was to be directly applied to our marketing strategy, and the whole semester, our professor would basically walk us through from beginning to end on how to put it together. So early on, we divvied up our roles for each person. There were about 7 people in our group in total, so there was plenty of help to be had for the different parts of the project, or at least there should have been. We would meet up weekly, and early on, a lot of it was just kind of roundtable discussions about what direction we wanted to take it. But as the semester went on, we started to notice some people were falling a bit behind. Each person falling behind apologized and assured us that they would get it all done when it was due. They gave excuses like they were just swapping other projects or classes or all that other stuff. Fast forward to the final week, and this is when we were to put all of our separate parts together and make it all mesh. And guess what happened with some members of the group? They didn't do a single thing all semester. They might have had some tally points on the subject, but it was far from a completed project, and it was basically something any middle schooler could have lined out. And when I saw this, I was furious. I and a few others in the group had spent a lot of time doing the research and putting it all together in a presentable form that was sure to impress not only my professor, but the marketing team of the affiliated sports group. The other reliable members of the group and I spent a lot of late nights working together just to cover for the other lazy teammates that we had to basically carry across the finish line. But alas, it was too little too late, and we were not going to be able to submit something presentable by the deadline. And I definitely did not want a bad grade for the amount of work I put in, for not only my portion of it, but for the portions of those who didn't do anything. So I met with my professor during her office hours and asked for a deadline extension, to which she replied by saying, "Absolutely not. I made you aware of this project on day 1 of the semester, so you have quite literally all semester to work on this. Why would you fall short of the deadline and need an extension in the first place?" So I explained the situation to my professor, who graciously understood what I had gone through. She asked to provide a list of all the members of my team, as well as exactly what and how much to the project they had contributed, and gave us an additional 24 hours to submit what we could. She said that she would take what I told her into consideration. Come the day of the presentation, and our professor was walking around with the marketing professionals that we were to present to, and I think she was listening closely to each person's part of the presentation just to verify what I had told her. Some of us knocked it out of the park on our portions, and others very quickly glanced over the topics. It was pretty evident who was a contributor and who was just a leech. About a week later, once final grades were posted, our team group chat was flooded with messages screaming that some of us got an F, claiming that we had a great marketing proposal and that professor was nothing but a jerk. But you know what? In the end, I got an A, and hopefully that will teach my other team members that next time they need to put some work in. Otherwise, they're just gonna fail. The original poster did the right thing in this situation. They worked on this all semester. They worked so hard to get this together, and their teammates basically let them down. So going to that professor is absolutely the right choice. I would refuse to let my grade go down the drain simply because my team members didn't do their job. I mean, how is that fair in the slightest? You put all this work in all semester just for everybody else to not do their job? Seriously though, the people that didn't do their job and didn't work on their stuff from the beginning of the semester absolutely deserve that F. And hopefully the next time they have to take this class, they take this seriously, because otherwise chances are they will just fail again for literally doing nothing. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.